Our protagonist, Maruhan, starts off as the typical loser character we all secretly root for. He's got the standard anxiety of the modern generation, someone who can't seem to do anything right, mixed with an unhealthy dose of fear about life itself. But as the story progresses, this guy evolves into a cold and calculating strategist, like a real-life Thomas Shelby. In a world where most people have, at most, a single skill, he possesses a unique and terrifying ability. He can consume monsters and steal a piece of their essence along with their abilities. This makes him the only person capable of stacking multiple skills, turning him into a one-of-a-kind powerhouse. But he's not entirely alone in this. His superior is Kong, an absolute powerhouse of a woman with a physique that would make anyone jealous. Not that you should be thinking about that. Some might say Maru is lucky, but the reality is that everything is stacked against him. In exactly 1 year, portals will open in the sky, unleashing a relentless rain of monsters upon Earth. And when that moment arrives, he will be the one responsible for stopping the invasion. But before we get to all that chaos, we need to rewind time and see how it all began. Everything kicks off in a restricted area, a camp deep in the forest. A man lies on the ground, his shirt stained red with blood, surrounded by lifeless bodies. Desperate, he gasps that something is lurking within the yellow dust. In the shifting haze, the silhouette of a towering figure emerges, wielding a massive crimson-stained blade, adorned with eerie bells on the tip. The wounded man, barely clinging to life, pleads for help, but before he can say anything else, a grotesque creature bursts from the underbrush, latching onto his leg. With terrifying force, he is dragged into the swirling mist, leaving only a bloodied trail behind. Sometime later, his lifeless body is found. A group of individuals, seemingly unfazed, examines the scene. One of them, a woman with glasses, sighs in annoyance, remarking that now they'll have to classify this as a casualty. Another woman, with raven black hair, observes the footprints leading away from the corpse, concluding that they'll need to get to work before things escalate further. The third member of their group, a striking figure with an aura of quiet authority, suddenly hears water flowing nearby. The three of them turn as she casually slips a hand into her pocket, gripping a small dagger. With one swift motion, she slices her palm, allowing her blood to coat the blade. Instantly, the strange liquid reacts, causing the weapon to extend and consume her entire arm, morphing into a full-sized sword. The woman with glasses points toward the swirling yellow dust, warning that it's coming. Without hesitation, the warrior steps forward, confidently declaring that she'll handle it. With the blade now fused to her, it becomes clear she is part of the Yellow Dust Task Force. Meanwhile, in an entirely different setting, a government building is buzzing with activity. Job interviews for public service positions are underway in the city of Seoul, and a room full of applicants anxiously waits for their turn. In the bathroom, someone is having a full-blown meltdown. He grips the sink, whispering to himself that he's about to die. He doesn't want to go in, he just wants to run away. His heart is pounding so fast it feels like it's going to burst from his chest. He splashes cold water on his face, struggling to calm down, repeating over and over that he can do this. He just needs to take a few more pills, a lot of them, but at least they help. As he grips the edge of the sink, something outside catches his eye. A tiny bird perches on a branch just beyond the window, tilting its head to stare directly at him. He locks eyes with the little creature, trapped in an unsettling moment of silence. Then, in the most unnatural way possible, the bird's eye widens grotesquely, and a voice echoes in his mind. "What are you looking at? You're screwed." For a brief second, he doesn't even react. He's so used to panic attacks that seeing a talking bird doesn't even register as particularly disturbing. Meanwhile, on a news report playing nearby, there's a headline about 4 campers who mysteriously disappeared near a rural province. But Maruhan isn't paying attention. He's already on his way to the interview room, repeating affirmations to himself. He can do this. Maruhan is 29 years old, and he is as average as humanly possible. He went to a regular school, attended a mediocre university, and has spent years struggling to find a job. But this year is different. It's his 5th attempt at becoming a public servant, and for the first time, he's made it to the final interview stage. A woman enters the waiting room, calls his name, and he immediately jumps up, beaming with enthusiasm. This is it. This time, he's going to make it. He marches into the interview room, repeating in his head that this will be easy, right up until he makes eye contact with the panel leader sitting behind the intimidating desk. The moment their eyes meet, his confidence shatters. He gulps audibly. The interviewer leans forward, expression unreadable, and asks the most basic but most nerve-wracking question. Why do you want to become a public servant? Maruhan freezes for a second, then blurts out in an awkward, unpolished voice. To give back to the community, to serve the people. His words are filled with forced enthusiasm, but in his head, he knows the real answer. He just wants stability, a steady paycheck, a safe life, and as little adventure as possible. The interviewer watches him carefully before asking the next question. What would you do if your superior did something unethical? Maruhan, who has already rehearsed this answer 1,000 times, smoothly responds, I would handle the situation with honesty, evaluate the issue carefully, and seek a solution while maintaining a positive attitude. Of course, he's lying through his teeth. If his boss did something sketchy, he wouldn't get involved at all. But he knows that saying that would get him disqualified, so he just tells them what they want to hear. Like hell, he's going to get himself tangled up in workplace drama. The interviewer narrows his eyes and leans in slightly before asking the next question. And how do you handle people? Grinning awkwardly, Maruhan confidently states that he's terrible at dealing with people. He admits he can't communicate well, gets stressed easily, and was bullied all through school because of his panic attacks. The interviewer looks at him, confused, while Maruhan suddenly realizes his mistake. He had spoken out loud what he was meant to keep in his head and had thought what he was supposed to say. His face burns with embarrassment, and he knows he completely screwed up. The interviewer lets out a small sigh, adjusts his glasses, and without missing a beat, announces that they'll move on to the final question. A sharp glint flashes from his lenses as he asks how Maruhan handled the most difficult moment of his life. The young man, still rattled from his previous blunder, casually says that life hasn't been that hard. He hasn't really faced any major hardships. But the interviewer doesn't buy it and presses him further, asking him to just name any problem that comes to mind. Maruhan, growing more uncomfortable, hesitates before muttering that nothing really stands out, except maybe that one time he went to the mountains with his father. As soon as the words leave his mouth, something shifts in his mind. His pulse skyrockets, his breath becomes shallow, and a cold sweat forms on his skin. A long-buried memory forces its way to the surface. He sees himself as a child, standing near a thick yellow fog. The air is heavy, and his heart pounds in his chest. A massive, shadowy figure lurks in the mist, its golden eyes gleaming like burning embers. Suddenly, it moves, and dozens of twisting eyes emerge from its grotesque form. The ground is littered with bloody, mangled corpses. His small body trembles. Back in the interview room, Maruhan is frozen, paralyzed by fear. His eyes blur, his vision spins, and before he can stop it, he collapses backward. The chair crashes to the ground, and he stares blankly at the ceiling, his mind barely processing reality. The interviewer rushes to his side, shaking his shoulder and calling his name. But Maruhan is still stuck in the memory, his breathing erratic, his body stiff. His stomach churns. A burning sensation rises in his throat, and despite his desperate attempt to hold it in, he throws up. Right on the interviewer. Everything goes silent. Later that day, Maruhan lies face down on his bed, completely destroyed. The interview, total disaster. He knows for a fact that his chances are dead and buried. No job, no girlfriend, no friends. How is he supposed to live a normal life at this rate? His self-loathing spiral is cut short by a loud knock on the door. He has no idea who it is. Still a complete mess, he stumbles over and half-heartedly opens the door. And standing there is a gigantic, insanely buff woman. For a second, he's not even sure if she's human. 3 meters tall, built like a walking fortress, she asks why the hell he didn't answer the door sooner. Maruhan, half-dazed, instinctively calls her Mom. When she steps inside, her sheer presence dominates the entire room. But despite looking like she could crush a bear with her bare hands, she's still a mom at heart. Casually, she says she brought him food and was about to leave. Still shaken, he thanks her, asking if there's any meat in it. She flatly tells him no, just tofu and beans. Disappointed but grateful, he takes it anyway. As she glances around his apartment, her expression darkens. The place is a total disaster. Instant ramen cups, greasy napkins, half-empty soda bottles. While he cheerfully digs into his food, she glares at the mess in horror. Without a word, she starts cleaning. Maruhan protests that he'll clean eventually, but she isn't listening. Instead, she drops the real bombshell, his interview. That single question destroys him. He immediately collapses, his soul leaving his body. There's no way in hell he's telling her he puked on the interviewer. His mother crosses her massive arms, then suddenly smacks him hard on the back, nearly knocking the air out of his lungs. If you failed, then don't stress over it. She keeps cleaning, then hands him an envelope full of money. Touched by the gesture, he hesitates before declining, muttering that he's an adult and needs to earn his own way. But before he can finish his noble speech, she effortlessly stretches out her absurdly muscular arm, making it clear he has no choice but to accept the money. Scratching her chiseled jawline, she mentions something strange, that if he failed the interview, then the shaman was right. Maruhan freezes. His heart drops. She tells him he has to go to the mountains. The scene jumps forward. He's already there, hiking up the path, sweating profusely under the scorching sun, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, truly the peak of bad decisions. As he walks, he realizes how long it's been since he's been here, the place where everything changed. His mother had told him that she had consulted a shaman about why he couldn't land a job. Apparently, it had nothing to do with his panic attacks or ADHD. Instead, it was because of his father, who died 20 years ago under mysterious circumstances. According to the shaman, his father had left a spiritual barrier on his soul, blocking his progress in life. To break the barrier, he needed to perform an offering on the mountain to appease his father's spirit. Despite walking endlessly, he has no idea where he's supposed to go. But finally, a massive wooden gate stands before him. Something about it feels off. He hesitates before slowly pushing it open, then pauses. For just a second, he sees something strange, a transparent figure, identical to himself. A ghost? A memory? He doesn't know. Heart pounding, he races toward a rundown house, hesitating only for a moment before slowly pushing the door open. Inside, a man stands with his back turned. Maruhan steps forward, the air thick with unease. After a long pause, he finally grasps the fabric of the man's pants, and in a quiet voice, murmurs, "I'm hungry." The man doesn't react at first, but when he finally turns around, something is terribly wrong. His face is twisted, inhuman, and then he screams. The sound shatters the illusion, and Maruhan stumbles back, breathless. In an instant, everything disappears. A sharp pain suddenly pierces Maruhan's chest, and he realizes that another panic attack is coming. His breathing becomes uneven, but he forces himself to take a deep breath in and slowly exhales to calm himself. Regaining some control, he reaches into his backpack, grabs a bottle of liquor, and pours it into a small cup. With a solemn expression, he throws the alcohol onto the ground inside the house, offering it to the spirits. "I hope you're somewhere out there enjoying yourself," he mutters, directing his words to his father. He's only here because his mother insisted on this ritual, hoping that it would bring his father peace, so he figures he might as well finish the prayer. Maruhan begins his offering to the mountain spirits, explaining that since his father passed away, his mother has been working tirelessly to support him so he could grow up and build a stable life. As he continues his prayer, a dense yellow fog slowly begins to creep in, silently swallowing the surroundings. Maruhan notices the sudden change and wonders if there's a fire on the mountain, causing all this smoke. His instincts kick in, and he decides that getting to safety is the top priority. He turns on his heel and starts running away from the fog, repeating to himself, "Safety first." Then something whispers the exact same phrase back to him. He immediately freezes, his body tensing up. Was that an echo? Confused, he cautiously turns around. Within the thick yellow mist, a figure emerges. His pulse spikes. He knows this shape. He's seen it before. But instead of running, he remains paralyzed, as if his body refuses to believe what his mind already knows. From the fog, a monstrous, grotesque creature reveals itself. Its twisted head, its gaping mouth, and its bloated stomach ooze blackened, corrupted flesh. It stares directly at him, its lips torn open into a jagged grin, and it speaks once again, "Safety first." Maruhan's first thought is that this is just another hallucination. This has to be another illusion. It's not real. Desperate, he wipes his eyes, hoping it will disappear. It doesn't. The monster steps forward. A shiver crawls up his spine. Something is terribly wrong. He needs to run now. But before he can react, a sharp pain rips through his abdomen. His knees buckle, and he falls to the ground, gasping for air. Something had just impaled him. Lying there, helpless, he starts to laugh bitterly. "So this is how I die, huh?" He spent his whole life studying, struggling, trying to secure a job, never once truly living. And now he's about to die before he ever got a chance to experience life. But then, another thought crosses his mind. If he dies, he won't have to worry about jobs, bills, or anything else. A small smile crosses his lips. "No one will care if I'm gone anyway," he whispers to himself. And then, his mother's face flashes in his mind. Her relentless efforts, her endless sacrifices, the countless ways she supported him no matter what. She was always happy just to see him alive. His mother never gave up on him. And if she won't give up on him, then neither will he. Determination burns through his veins as he forces himself to rise, even with the jagged wound in his stomach. He refuses to die here. The creature twitches, sniffing the air, its distorted body jerking unnaturally as it stares him down. It repeats its eerie chant once more, safety first. Then, it lunges forward, its enormous mouth splitting open, revealing something horrifying, an eye embedded deep within its throat. The jaws clamp down on his waist, sinking its razor-sharp teeth into his flesh. Maruhan screams in agony. He pushes against the beast, trying desperately to keep its gaping mouth away from his body, but its sheer size is overwhelming. His strength is fading. He can't hold out much longer. If this keeps up, he's gonna pass out. And then, he remembers his father's words. A feral instinct ignites in his brain. If the monster can bite, so can he. With a surge of desperation, he sinks his own teeth into the creature's throat, tearing out a chunk of its flesh. Blood spurts out in a violent gush. The creature lets out a distorted screech, staggering back, its body convulsing from the unexpected pain. Maruhan, still panting heavily, suddenly notices something strange. Within the monster's open mouth, the eye at the back of its throat begins to glow. A dark energy surges outward, pulsating in eerie waves. And then his mind shatters. His vision erupts into a sea of horrifying images. He sees countless bodies, twisted and broken, piled together like discarded meat. Shadowy creatures writhe and tear each other apart in a never-ending battle for dominance, all while an enormous green eye looms above them, silently observing. He feels as though he's being dragged into something far beyond human comprehension. What is this? He barely manages to think. Who's speaking to me? Am I already dead? His senses become overwhelmed. The taste of metal and rot fills his mouth. His vision darkens. Then, a voice calls out to him. Someone is shouting his name. He forces his eyes open. A man with sandy blonde hair and a Hawaiian shirt stares down at him, arms crossed. What the hell are you doing in a restricted area? Maruhan, his mouth still smeared with blood, stares blankly in confusion. He scrambles to his feet, heart racing. Where's the monster? Where's the yellow mist? The man in the Hawaiian shirt narrows his eyes. What did you say? What did you see? Still struggling to process everything, Maruhan stammers out that a strange yellow fog suddenly appeared, and then he was attacked by a monster. He doesn't know how, but he should be dead. His stomach was completely torn open. The two people standing before him exchange knowing glances. The blonde man gestures to his companion, a stoic-looking woman with long black hair and glasses. She nods, pressing a small device on her wrist. Faint beep sounds. The man clicks his tongue. So the alarm was real after all. Damn, I thought it was a false report. Then, his gaze shifts back to Maruhan, an almost amused smirk forming on his face. So, the kid actually killed it, huh? The woman immediately dismisses the idea. That's impossible. Even if he absorbed demonic energy from the monster's blood, there's no way he could use its powers instantly. The man doesn't look convinced. Instead, he turns to Maruhan, eyeing him curiously. Tell me, kid, do you even know what happened yesterday? Maruhan, still in his torn, blood-stained clothes, tilts his head in confusion. Yesterday, something feels off. He instinctively reaches for his phone, turns it on, and his eyes widen in shock. He's been unconscious for an entire day. The two strangers observe him carefully. If he survived this long, that means he definitely gained abilities, the woman mutters. The man grins, slapping a hand onto Maruhan's shoulder. Guess what, kid? You showed up at just the right time. That means you're joining in. Maruhan has no idea what's happening, but the man simply waves him off. First things first, though, get changed. Your clothes are a mess. Maru found himself standing at the new employee orientation for the Special Service Division, completely lost. He had no idea why he was suddenly part of an official government training session. The atmosphere was tense, and the people around him all looked strange and unsettling. The expressions they wore weren't those of normal employees. They seemed hardened, dangerous. Then she appeared. A woman in red wooden clogs stepped forward, adjusting her pants before addressing the group. Her jawline was sharp, her frame intimidating, exuding raw physical power. She introduced herself as Jung, the head of the division, and officially welcomed them as new employees. Maru raised his hand immediately, completely bewildered. He wasn't supposed to be here. There had to be a mistake. But Jung shut him down instantly. She had just received confirmation he was officially hired. He stood there, frozen. What the hell was this woman talking about? Without giving him a chance to process, Jung continued her introduction. She reminded everyone that employees of the Special Service Division were responsible for protecting civilian lives. Because of this, they were strictly forbidden from disclosing their job details to family, relatives, or close acquaintances. Violating this rule meant punishment under the National Security Act. Maru felt the weight of those words. That was serious. Jung then shifted the focus to their new abilities. Everyone in the room had recently developed powers after exposure to demon blood. When demon blood merged with a human's bloodstream, there was a small chance of awakening an ability. At that moment, Maru pieced it together. That must have happened when he took a bite out of that monster. Jung continued, explaining that for now, demons only inhabited the mountains. The yellow mist was the first indicator of a demon's presence. The mist's concentration ranged from 1 to 10. The denser the mist, the stronger the creature. Then, she called out Wu. A young man with a flawless face and a confident aura raised his hand. Jung nodded approvingly. Since Wu had inherited a level 7 demon's ability, she was looking forward to seeing his potential. He responded with a self-assured smile, promising to do his best. Then, Jung's gaze landed on Maru. She noted that he had gained a level 1 demon's ability and asked what it was. Maru, standing awkwardly in place, admitted that he had no idea what his ability was. From the side, someone laughed under their breath. Maru gritted his teeth. He ignored it, deciding to focus on escaping this nightmare as soon as possible. Suddenly, a blaring alarm filled the room. Jung glanced at the notification. A demon had appeared. Perfect timing. Without hesitation, she led the group up the mountain. As she walked ahead, she explained that this would be their first practical test. It was the perfect opportunity for them to test their newfound abilities. Maru, meanwhile, was spiraling. What the hell was happening? Why was he getting dragged into this? He needed to get out of there before things got dangerous. But before he could fully grasp the situation, he froze in place. The yellow mist, it was there right in front of him. His stomach churned, his skin crawled. Then, in the depths of the mist, he saw a silhouette. It was a woman. No, her arms were wrapped around something. A man. She turned to face him. His blood ran cold. She was beautiful, but something was horribly wrong. A long, jagged stake was impaled through the chest of a towering, 3-meter-tall creature. Maru's legs gave out beneath him. He collapsed onto the ground, trembling. The rest of the recruits were stunned, watching in silent awe. Jung's voice cut through the tension. This is a level 1 demon, the weakest type. The woman standing before them was Kong Shana. Jung assured everyone that there was nothing to fear. Kong had already pinned the demon down. Meanwhile, Kong was intrigued. Her eyes locked onto Maru, the pathetic-looking rookie on the ground. She had heard about him, the one who had killed a demon yesterday. She was curious. It was extremely rare for someone to awaken a power at the exact moment they first encountered a demon. She wanted to see his potential. Jung clapped her hands. Now, let's begin. The recruits were ordered to activate their abilities. Maru, however, remained frozen. His heart was pounding. His breath was shallow. Panic attack. He couldn't breathe. His mind blurred, and suddenly he was somewhere else. The world shifted. He was standing on a river of red. In the distance, something approached. A black, wolf-like creature with long, humanoid arms crawled toward him. Its distorted female form loomed closer, its pale claws reaching for his head. Maru's body didn't move. He was powerless. The monster grabbed his skull, turned his face to the side, and whispered a single command. Eat. Then he was back. His mind was clouded, his vision hazy. Saliva dripped from his mouth. A deep, insatiable hunger gnawed at his core. The sheer intensity of it overwhelmed every other emotion. He wanted to eat. He needed to eat. His body ached for it. Then a hand tapped his shoulder. Maru flinched violently, snapping back to reality. It was Wu. He was watching him with a disgusted expression. Maru blinked, still disoriented. Wu asked him if he was laughing out of fear. Maru, still caught between two realities, responded honestly. No, I'm just starving. Maruhin is still struggling to process everything when a new frustration arises. Senor, one of the team members, scoffs at him for being pathetic enough to feel hungry at a time like this. If only this arrogant guy knew what had just happened. Honestly, with Maruhan's new ability to consume demons, Senor should be grateful he didn't get a bite taken out of him instead. For now, Maruhan forces himself to calm down. He takes a deep breath and tries to piece together what just happened. Meanwhile, at the top of the mountain, Jung gathers everyone around. Before anyone attempts to use their newly gained abilities, she explains the basic principles of their power. The yellow mist itself is emitted by demons. The stronger the demon, the denser the mist becomes. Then, to demonstrate something critical, she pulls out a knife, slices her own hand, and lets the blood drip. She explains that those who gain power from demons also regenerate faster when inside the mist. However, while their healing factor is enhanced, a fatal injury will still kill them, so they must remain cautious. Additionally, their powers only activate within the mist and while fighting creatures, meaning that outside of this zone, they are nothing more than regular humans. Maruhan is still too shaken to fully absorb this information, but the arrogant Senor laughs, acting like he already knew all of this. How long is this guy gonna act like he's above everyone else? Then, Jung moves on to the most important part, how to actually activate their powers. She bites her lip, drawing blood, and immediately, the yellow mist reacts, swirling toward her. At the same time, her body undergoes a transformation, her eyes glowing golden. She clenches her fist and puts on a special glove, explaining that the key to activating their power is allowing the mist to enter their bloodstream. With that, she smirks and declares that training is about to begin. Suddenly, a sharp cracking sound echoes through the air. The stake lodged in the monster's skull violently shatters, sending fragments flying. Kang's expression hardens as she shouts for everyone to be on guard. The yellow mist thickens, swirling aggressively, and the demon, once thought to be dead, suddenly begins to rise again. A chilling roar shakes the ground, sending shockwaves through the group. The new recruits, barely adjusted to their abilities, freeze in fear, their knees trembling. Kang immediately prepares to intervene, but Jung raises a hand to stop her. Despite the growing danger, Jung remains unfazed. She insists that this is the perfect opportunity for the recruits to practice. If they couldn't handle a simple level 1 demon, then they would only end up dead anyway. Brutal but true. The demon suddenly stops and sniffs the air, its head snapping toward Maruhan. A chill runs down his spine. Why is it looking at him? The creature's hand twitches, then a blade shoots out from its palm, aimed directly at Maruhan. Before he can react, thwack. The blade plunges straight into his arm. A sharp, searing pain erupts through his body, and he collapses onto the ground, writhing in agony. Kang rushes forward, concern flashing across her face. But before she can reach him, the demon moves again. With thunderous footsteps, the beast advances, towering over Maruhan's injured body. The ground quakes beneath its weight, and in one swift motion, it raises its massive fist, ready to crush him. Maruhan grits his teeth, struggling to stand, but it's too late. The shadow of the demon's massive hand looms over him, its claws about to rip straight through his back, until something unexpected bursts from the ground. A strange, grotesque, centipede-like creature suddenly coils around the demon, constricting its movement. Maruhan's eyes widen in shock. This was Senor's ability, the demonic centipede. For someone who acts all high and mighty, his power is disgustingly fitting. While the centipede restrains the demon, a female recruit seizes the opportunity. Darting forward, she unleashes a ferocious slash across the creature's skull. Blood sprays into the mist, and the monster lets out a deafening screech. The girl smirks confidently, believing that they've won. But something is wrong. The yellow mist suddenly surges back toward the demon, swirling around its gaping wound. Before their eyes, its skull begins to regenerate. A horrified realization washes over them. The demon's recovery speed is amplified inside the mist, just like their own. The creature rips the centipede off its body, swinging it like a weapon. Because Senor's centipede was still connected to his arm, the demon uses it to fling him straight toward the female recruit, knocking them both to the ground. The beast lunges toward them, its mouth widening to devour them whole. And then crack, a sharp snapping sound echoes through the mist. The demon's head violently twists to the side, its neck breaking on impact. His body convulses, then collapses. Maruhan blinks in confusion, trying to comprehend what just happened. Then his eyes land on a new figure. A man stands nearby, effortlessly adjusting his gloves. Senor, still recovering from being thrown, realizes something. This guy wasn't just anyone. He had the ability of the demonic temple guardian. His power allowed him to break bones, both his own and those of whatever he touched, which meant He broke his own wrist to snap the demon's neck. The demon writhes for a few moments, then finally stops moving. The group watches in stunned silence. Senor, still on the ground, mutters, "Demons usually die when you sever their heads. If they can't emit or absorb mist anymore, their bodies shut down." For the first time, the new recruits realize how dangerous their enemies truly are. The man with the bone-breaking ability casually shrugs, saying that this was a good chance to test something new. Then, Kong suddenly steps in from behind him. Her eyes narrow suspiciously. She demands to know if he broke her knife on purpose, just to wake the demon up. Instead of admitting it, he smirks and denies everything. "What proof do you have?" Kong grabs his wrist, tightening her grip. "Then let's break a few of your fingers and see if my knife breaks again." Before things escalate further, Jung claps her hands, interrupting. She acknowledges that Senor performed well for his first time, but there's a bigger problem. Someone is missing. Maruhan sprints away from the battlefield, his heart pounding in his chest. Nope, nope, nope. He wants nothing to do with this life. Who in their right mind would want to fight demons for a living? All he wants is a quiet, stable, normal existence. But unfortunately for him, someone needs to tell him he's the protagonist, because fate isn't going to let him escape that easily. As he runs deeper into the restricted area, Ayong shakes her head, sighing that anyone who flees like that is unqualified to be a special public officer. Meanwhile, Kong is still trying to make sense of what she just saw. There were so many potential targets in that area, and yet the demon ignored all of them and went straight for Maruhan. Something wasn't right. Young, without wasting any time, orders her team to find Maruhan immediately, making sure he's not already dead. However, Kong notices something obvious that no one else has. Why hasn't the yellow mist disappeared? That single question stops everyone in their tracks. If the boss-level demon had been slain, the mist should have cleared by now. But instead, it was still as thick as ever. That meant only one thing. There was another demon. Meanwhile, Maruhan stumbles to a halt in front of an old metal gate, breathing heavily. The air around it is thick with yellow mist, almost radiating an unnatural presence. His chest tightens. Why is it here? Why is this happening again? As if on cue, something shifts in the mist. A shadow looms over him, and then, from the darkness, a new monster emerges. 15 meters tall, hulking, an abomination. Maruhan ducks behind a bush, his entire body frozen in terror. Why is it always him? All he wants to do is get away, but it's like he's cursed to run into these creatures. He slowly peeks out, hoping the monster has vanished, only to find it right behind him. His heart nearly stops. Just then, a voice echoes through the forest, calling for Kong. It's the TikToker-looking guy with the dyed hair, Shauna. Kong turns toward him, demanding to know what's going on. Shauna explains that he just received an urgent notice from HQ. A level 3 demon has appeared in the area. Jung frowns. That doesn't make sense. Demons don't typically appear one after another like this. Kong immediately asks for the location, and at this point, we all know exactly where it is. Cut to Maruhan, still running for his life, tripping over roots, slipping on dirt, and screaming for someone, anyone to save him. But there is no one. He frantically scans his surroundings and recognizes something, his childhood home. It's the same house from his vision, the one his father once stood in. He knows this place. He knows where to hide. Maruhan dashes inside, slamming himself against a metal door. Panting, he tries to collect himself. What the hell was that thing? Why did it target him? Slowly, he peers through a small gap in the door, praying that the monster lost interest. No such luck. It's right outside. It hasn't moved an inch. Maruhan clenches his fists, overwhelmed with frustration. Why won't it leave him alone? Then, something else catches his attention. A rustling sound. The gate creaks open. An elderly woman enters the area, calling out to someone. She frowns, confused by the thick mist surrounding the house. Maruhan's eyes widen in horror. She can't see the demon. The old woman squints into the distance, mumbling something about a woman named Shang Sik. The demon tilts its head, repeating her words in a garbled, twisted voice. The old woman blinks. Why are you copying me? Then she sees it. Her cataracts may be strong, but not strong enough to miss a towering, grotesque nightmare standing right in front of her. Her legs give out. She collapses backward in terror. The demon merely repeats her words once more. Then it raises its clawed hand. Maruhan's mind goes blank. If he doesn't do something, she'll die. But what can he even do? He has no powers, no real abilities. He's nothing. He clenches his trembling fists. Maybe Maybe he should just stay hidden. Maybe it's better if he saves himself. His heart pounds against his ribs as he struggles with the decision. And then the old woman speaks again. Her voice is so soft, so human, so alive. And Maruhan realizes something. He doesn't want to die, but he also doesn't want to watch someone else die just because he was too scared to act. In that moment, his body moves on its own. Before the demon can launch its attack, Maruhan throws himself in front of the old woman. The impact is instant, pain everywhere. The blow sends him flying back, crashing into the old woman's arms. When she opens her eyes, she's met with a horrifying sight. Maruhan, covered in blood, barely holding on to consciousness. He weakly asks if she's okay. She nods, tears in her eyes. Then he collapses. His arm is missing. His body is riddled with wounds. Maruhan laughs bitterly. This is it. This is how he dies. What a joke. What a useless ability. He's going to die with a skill as pathetic as his resume, weak, irrelevant, and completely worthless. All he can do now is hope someone stronger comes to save him. But no one comes. Instead, something else happens. The yellow mist surges toward him. His veins begin to bulge. Something inside him snaps, and suddenly he is starving. The pain disappears. His vision sharpens, and before he can even think, he lunges at the demon's neck and bites down. Meanwhile, Kong rushes through the forest, determined to locate Maruhan. Suddenly, a blood-curdling scream rings out. She spins around, charging toward the source of the sound. Then, she throws the gate open, and what she sees stops her dead in her tracks. Maruhan. His mouth is latched onto the demon's neck, ripping into its flesh. He is eating it. Kang's eyes widen in horror. What the hell is this new recruit doing? The demon, enraged, grabs Maruhan by the head and hurls him into a wall. He slumps against the ground, seemingly unconscious. But then his throat moves. He swallowed it, and the demon is furious. As the monster attempts to flee, Kong notices something strange. The part of its body that Maruhan bit isn't regenerating. She doesn't understand why, but this isn't the time to dwell on it. She lunges forward, closing the distance between her and the creature in an instant. Leaping onto its back, she grabs hold of one of its crystal-like growths and rips it out. Activating the steel demon's ability, the crystal transforms into a massive sword in her hands. The monster screeches in pain, its body trembling as it retaliates. Spinning projectiles shoot from its body, flying straight at Kong. But she's faster. Turning just in time, she swings her blade, deflecting the incoming attacks effortlessly. The monster is forced to defend against its own attacks, momentarily leaving itself wide open. And Kong is already there. With one precise vertical slash, she splits the creature in two. The monstrous form crumbles into dust, disintegrating into the very mist it once emitted. The battle is over. Kong stands in the rain of blood, her body drenched in crimson, completely unfazed. As the last remnants of the creature fade away, she turns to the elderly woman, making sure she's unharmed. The old lady, dazed and confused, slowly regains consciousness. Kong, now somehow completely clean, brushes off any concern, telling the woman not to worry. A wild boar had passed through, causing all the commotion. The old lady, still a bit shaken, believes the story without question, mentioning that wild boars come through all the time. Kong reassures her that she'll take care of any future problems before sending her home safely. But her expression darkens the moment the woman leaves. She turns toward Maruhan, her gaze sharp. What the hell is up with this guy? A low-level ability user like him shouldn't be able to regenerate an entire arm out of nowhere. Even if he somehow absorbed a demon's power, it shouldn't be that effective. She needs to figure out what he really is. Meanwhile, Maruhan is absolutely furious. After everything he's been through, he just got a notification he's starting his job tomorrow. Memories of the monster impaling him, the horrifying encounter, the sheer agony of the battle flash through his mind. He's not doing this. Absolutely not. Falling onto his bed, he groans, convincing himself there's no way he's going to that job. But on the other hand, he's completely broke. He needs a job. Desperation settles in. He tells himself he'll sleep on it and figure things out in the morning. But as always, peace is never an option. As soon as he closes his eyes, he's thrown back into the nightmare. The war of the crimson demons, the endless cycle of slaughter, the eerie voice calling him back. His body jerks awake, drenched in sweat. He looks at his hands, confused and unsettled. What the hell is happening to him? Morning has arrived, but as he glances outside, his stomach drops. The entire mountain is on fire. Through the thick smoke and blazing embers, something moves. A creature of ash and flame, walking through the burning trees, leaving destruction in its wake. But then, a girl appears. Completely soaked, she hurls water at the beast, trying to suppress the fire. Honestly, those tiny water droplets don't seem too effective. Luckily, she's not alone. Another fighter arrives, encasing the monster's legs in ice, freezing it in place. With the creature momentarily trapped, the girl calls out to her leader, noting how it's strange for a creature like this to appear at night. But the team captain isn't concerned with that right now. Their priority is stopping the wildfire from spreading. However, as the ice begins to crack, the monster roars. Its body begins to thaw. One of the fighters draws his dual swords, rushing toward the frozen beast. But just as he's about to land a decisive blow, something shifts. A dark eye emerges from the creature's forehead. The demonic gaze locks onto the warrior. A chilling voice echoes through the air. "Bring me that person." The monster breaks free. Its massive fist collides with the swordsman mid-attack. The impact sends him flying into a tree, his body slamming hard against the bark. The team shouts his name, but the monster crouches, its body shifting. Its back cracks open like a furnace, lava spilling out. The size begins to change. The captain watches in horror. Why is it growing stronger? Meanwhile, at headquarters, the entire control room is in chaos. Every screen is flashing red, alarms blaring as emergency warnings flood the monitors. Jung, standing at the center of it all, demands a status report. A nervous officer responds, "We're under attack." Jung's expression hardens. "How many locations?" The officer gulps. 20 mountains. Simultaneously, Jung's eyes narrow. This isn't normal. The pattern of these monster appearances suddenly changed this week. But why? She doesn't have time to dwell on it. Another officer calls out, "Director, we have an urgent call from Busan." Jung answers immediately. "What's the situation?" The man on the other end of the line greets her casually, calling her Big Sis. It's Byun-sik, the director of Busan. She's not in the mood for small talk. "Get to the point, Byun." Byun sighs, finally getting serious. "We've had a portal open for 3 days straight." Jung frowns. "That shouldn't be possible." Byun continues, "Monsters keep pouring out. Our team has been fighting non-stop, but they're exhausted. We need backup." Jung leans forward. "Why hasn't the portal closed yet? Have you identified the cause?" Byun hesitates before answering. "We sent our best interpreter, and she says the monsters are all repeating the same thing." Jung waits. Byun finally speaks. They keep saying, "Bring me that person." As the monster continued leaping through the area, Jung demanded to know who exactly this certain person was. The response from the Busan director, Byun-sik, only deepened the mystery. They had no idea. No one knew who this person was, but whoever it was, they needed to appear immediately. Without hesitation, Jung made a direct call. Meanwhile, in a helicopter, a man casually picked up his phone mid-flight. She quickly explained the situation on the mountain, and before she could even finish, he had already jumped out of the helicopter. Plummeting through the air like a shooting star, he activated his abilities mid-fall, allowing the yellow mist to engulf him. This guy wasn't just fearless, he was built different. As he descended gracefully, he activated spatial inversion, his body floating mid-air before landing effortlessly on the top of the portal. The surrounding hunters and soldiers were baffled. Who was this guy? A woman below called out to him, warning that it was too dangerous. At that moment, the red-horned demon grinned, sensing his arrival. The monster lunged forward, targeting the same woman who had been yelling at him. She saw the attack coming but knew she had no time to dodge. But before the monster could land a deadly, piercing kick, the newcomer calmly reached into thin air, opening a spatial tear. From inside the void, he pulled out the creature's entire spine. The onlookers stood in shock. The demon spasmed, unable to move. With a calm and composed voice, the man commended them on their efforts. From here on, he would handle everything. They could rest. The leader grinned, overjoyed at the reinforcement, while the rest of the team stared in disbelief. Who the hell was this guy? Then he finally introduced himself. He was the first user of supernatural abilities. He founded the Special Task Force. His name was Jong Il-do, and he was the most powerful spatial ability user in history. Stretching his arms, he placed his hands on the ground, activating his power. Purple lines pulsed through the terrain, spreading toward the portal. the sky began to glow, the energy rising past the treetops and reaching toward the moon itself. Everyone could see it. Even from miles away, the entire city turned their heads to witness this phenomenon. A man with glasses, standing far away, stared in awe. I've never seen this before, but that must be the most powerful spatial ability in existence. Back on the burning mountain, the massive lava monster was still rampaging. The duo of water and ice users had no chance. The girl collapsed, exhausted. The guy realized they were both about to die. With a final desperate attempt, he urged her to get up, but the creature was already launching its finishing blow. The ice user raised a fragile barrier, but the monster's fist shattered it instantly, sending him flying. As the monster closed in for the final attack, something appeared behind it. A spatial rift opened. From inside, a hand grabbed the monster's head, and through it, the beast was sent flying, exploding into the distance. The force shattered the trees, sending crows scattering into the sky. Jong Il-do stepped forward, cracking his knuckles. Time to clean up. Not just this demon, all of them. He activated the rift units, spreading his ability across all the mountains. Across the province of Gangwon, a young man was being stomped on by a monster. The creature growled something strange before piercing his chest. And then a portal appeared behind the monster. It was pulled inside. This happened across every battlefield. One by one, every monster terrorizing the mountains was being dragged into the same location. Good news? All the demons were in one place now. Bad news? All the demons were in one place now. Jung's team monitored the situation, watching as the signals of the demons started vanishing from their radars. One of the analysts reported, "The readings are disappearing." The director, observing the screens, calmly nodded. That just means he arrived safely. In the center of the newly formed battlefield, monsters filled every direction. Jong Il-do stood in the middle of them, unfazed. Every single demon turned toward him, and then they charged. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he pointed at one of them. A spatial cut opened in the air. A second later, he spun on his heels, executing a perfect motion, and then every monster's head flew into the air. The spectators were speechless. They had never seen anything like this. Jong Il-do calmly walked toward the magma demon, calling for the translator. Ask it why they've been acting up this week. The girl, still shaken by the carnage she just witnessed, translated. The monster repeated its usual phrase. Bring me that person. Jong Il-do's expression remained neutral. Who is that person? The monster simply echoed the question back. The translator quickly explained it wasn't answering, it was just copying. Without hesitation, Jong Il-do slammed the monster into the ground. If that's the case, we'll just keep killing you until one of you starts talking. His body was drenched in blood, but his work wasn't over. Now, there was one last thing left to do. He placed his palm against the ground again, activating another spatial distortion. This time, the portal formed directly beneath the gate itself. And with that, the entire portal was absorbed. The battle was over. In the distance, a hunter whispered to herself, "It's reassuring. Knowing someone like that is on our side." In just a second, Jong Il-do erased the portal, as if it had never existed. The next day, back at headquarters, Jung stormed into his office, demanding answers. She wanted to know what exactly he did with that portal. Jong Il-do, visibly exhausted, simply replied that it was stored inside his black space. But even in his weakened state, Jung had the audacity to scold him, telling him to clean up everything just like always. He sighed, explaining that he had his limits too. It wasn't like he could run the entire organization alone. Switching the TV on, he handed her a file. Inside were the documents of all the new recruits. Confused, she asked why he was so interested in them. Jong explained that he was trying to figure out what the demons wanted, and more importantly, why they were looking for this certain person. Meanwhile, deep within a landscape of corpses, decaying bodies, and grotesque monsters, a colossal woman-like entity loomed in the distance. Its eerie green eye remained fixated, whispering the same chilling phrase, "Bring him to me." At that exact moment, our protagonist, Maru Han, was preparing for his first day of work. His mother was overjoyed, her eyes brimming with tears upon hearing that her son had finally landed a government job. Though he couldn't share much about the details, seeing her that happy left him with no choice but to go through with it. However, the second he arrived at the base, he was met by Hawaiian shirt guy, Diakman, who immediately scowled at him. "Why the hell did you come back?" "I don't want to work with some coward." Maru barely had time to react. The guy already smelled like pure alcohol. The team leader greeted Seo Mu, the other new recruit, but Seo Mu wasted no time making it clear that he wanted a transfer to the main city. The leader sighed, saying that he also wasn't sure why someone ranked level 7 had been sent to this island outpost. It was obvious something was off. Regardless, they were officially part of the team now. As Maru was still processing everything, the team leader opened a door, and Maru's expectations were immediately shattered. What he imagined, a high-tech facility filled with battle-hardened warriors fighting against terrifying monsters. What he got, a boring, cramped office with a few workers sitting at desks. Inside, the Hawaiian shirt guy formally introduced himself as Diakman, the team captain. The others followed: Yoon Jong, a veteran with 7 years in the unit; King Ibok, a soldier who had been there for 5 years; Ayak, the colorful-haired TikTok addict with just 1 year on the job. The leader welcomed them and told them to take any seat they wanted. Still trying to process the absurdity of it all, Maru hesitantly took a seat, shivering from the cold air conditioning. He glanced around the office, wondering if everyone else had been this nervous on their first day. With a forced smile, he awkwardly greeted the others. Silence. Without even turning around, Seo Mu snapped at him. "Stop looking at me." Great. Day 1, and he was already isolated. With nothing else to do, Maru decided to talk to Ayak, who was casually browsing designer clothes online. Curious, Maru asked what exactly this unit did. Ayak, barely looking away from his phone, explained that they were a special force dealing with the yellow dust phenomenon. He elaborated further. There were 3 main task force bases in Seoul. Anyone ranked level 7 or higher got assigned to major missions. However, this specific island, it was where they sent people who were either completely useless or just plain weird. Hearing that, Maru instantly felt at home. Well, that explains why I'm here. But even though he joked about it, something still didn't feel right. Ayak added that there were some rare cases of highly skilled individuals volunteering to come here. Right then, they both turned to look at someone nearby. There she was, Kong, training intensely, completely focused. Maru swallowed hard. This girl was insane. Meanwhile, Yoon Jong, watching her, told her to go home now that her shift was over. She didn't even flinch. Instead, she sat down, calmly stating that she had no home to go back to. While this was happening, Kong couldn't help but feel something was off. She had no memory of what happened yesterday. Meanwhile, Maru's face lit up when he heard about an extra salary bonus. Then the realization hit. The extra money was only there because this was a high-risk job. It suddenly made sense. This wasn't just a stable government job. It was a death trap. Ayak then casually dropped another fact. By the way, we get paid 5 times more than normal jobs. Maru's entire outlook changed. 5 times? Bro, forget what I said earlier. I'm all in. But Ayak, not in the mood for his nonsense, told him to shut up and stop bothering him. With nothing else to do, Maru just sat there, waiting for something to happen. Days passed. Slowly, he started getting used to the routine. To his surprise, the job was actually pretty easy. No actual combat, no stress, just a government desk job with a ridiculously high salary. One day, Diakman stretched and yawned. All right, that's it for today. He turned to the new recruits. First day done. Got any questions? Seo Mu, still pissed off about being stuck there, flatly said no. Maru, however, raised his hand. Yeah, I got one. Where exactly do these demons come from? And why are they here? Diakman shrugged. No clue. Maru blinked. Wait, you guys don't know? Seo Mu sighed. Everyone assumes they come from up there. He pointed to the sky. Maru suddenly realized something. No one actually knew where the demons came from. And worse, no one really seemed to care. This was the beginning of humanity's downfall. It was frustrating, but Maru couldn't deny that he had lived his entire life without even knowing these things existed. Somehow, the task force was doing their job even if they were a bunch of weirdos. Meanwhile, back at headquarters, Jung was descending in an elevator, her expression tense. As the doors opened, she found Jong Il-do standing in front of a golden containment capsule, staring intently. Without looking at her, he asked what she thought. She glanced at a stack of documents in her hands and said that, at the very least, the appearance of monsters seemed to have returned to normal. Jong remained silent, eyes locked on the swirling yellow smoke. He was deep in thought, trying to figure out the cause behind the sudden surge of creatures. Jung speculated that it could be a sign that they were finally getting closer to understanding the real truth behind everything. Inside the capsule was an eerie sight, a bound, upside-down fallen angel with long white hair. Jong narrowed his eyes. He wasn't sure yet, But for now, he wanted all task force leaders to stay on high alert. If the rest of the organization found out about this, it would cause absolute chaos. The scene shifted to Maru, who was completely out of the loop. Instead, he was standing in front of a grill, watching his teammates cook barbecue and wondering what the hell they were talking about. The group was drinking and laughing, enjoying their food, while Maru felt like he was missing something important. Aeon, one of the team members, casually mentioned the prophecy, saying it was the exact reason they tried to enjoy life as much as possible every single day. Confused, Maru asked for a proper explanation. Diakman, munching on some meat, leaned in and spilled the truth. There was a prophecy. In exactly 1 year, demons would start raining from the skies. Countless portals would open all over the world, and the earth would be drenched in blood. Maru froze. That sounded horrifying. Diakman smirked and told him to keep it a secret because it was a classified, top-secret secret. Meanwhile, Aeon encouraged everyone to drink until they puked. Ayak, the TikTok addict, just wanted to go home. And Kangshana? She sternly reminded everyone that they had work tomorrow. Siomu, however, was completely knocked out. It seemed like alcohol was his biggest weakness. Meanwhile, Maru was desperately trying to stop everyone from getting wasted, all while wondering why no one seemed remotely afraid of this supposed prophecy. At that exact moment, far away, above a mountain, a golden light erupted from the heavens. A portal appeared, unleashing thick yellow dust. From within, countless hands began to emerge. As the first bald-headed monster started pushing its way out, everyone's phones buzzed with an emergency alert. Diakman sighed, annoyed. Monsters appearing at night? Such a pain. I just wanted to relax for once. Kangshana, however, immediately stood up. I'll be back soon. Siomu quickly followed. I'm coming with you. But Kang stopped him, shaking her head. No. I want to take Senor and Maru instead. Maru nearly face-planted into the glass window. Why the hell was he getting dragged into this? As they got into the car, Kang turned to Maru, sensing his unease. You don't have to worry so much about the prophecy, she reassured him. He scoffed. How am I supposed to just ignore something like that? She explained that the higher-ups were definitely making their own preparations. Sure, he might not know the full extent of it, but there were plenty of powerful individuals working behind the scenes. For now, their only concern was finding and eliminating the demons that appeared. Maru, despite his fear, couldn't help but admire how cool she was. Then she grinned at him, eyes gleaming with curiosity. Besides, I have a feeling you have some kind of special ability. I can't wait to see it in action. For the first time in his life, someone actually had expectations for him. Felt weird. Then, she said something unexpected. I've never seen anyone eat demons before. Maru froze. Huh. Kang tilted her head. Your ability, isn't it related to gluttony? Maru had no idea what she was talking about. She explained further, he literally had the power to consume demons. He didn't like the sound of that. Before he could protest, a monster suddenly appeared in front of them. Kang moved instantly, pinning the creature down with ease. Then, grinning brightly, she turned to Maru. Go ahead, take a bite. Maru stared at her in horror. You want me to what? Kang explained that his ability seemed to prevent the demons from regenerating. And now, she wanted to see it in action. Maru, disgusted, reluctantly grabbed one of the monster's tentacles. If he had to do this, he needed to mentally trick himself. It's just like eating octopus. Just like octopus. Just like octopus. He bit into it, tasted like death. Noticing his half-hearted effort, Kang scolded him. If you're gonna do it right. Take a big bite. Maru groaned. Fine. With visible regret, he chomped down harder, forcing himself to chew. The next day, back at the office, he was dying. Siomu, noticing his miserable state, smirked. I heard you threw up yesterday. Pathetic. Maru groaned, head throbbing. He didn't even care about Siomu's insults. He just wanted to survive the day. Siomu, however, wasn't done. Honestly, they should have sent someone useful instead of you. You're lucky the commander has some interest in your stupid ability. Then, without another word, Siomu walked away, calling him a useless piece of trash. Maru felt the sting of those words, but he wasn't wrong. Maru needed to get serious. He couldn't keep half-assing everything. And just as he came to that realization, the alarm blared. Kang immediately stood up, turning to him. Maru, let's go. Maru was in the bathroom, face buried in his hands, wondering how he was ever going to get used to eating those disgusting monsters. Sure, having an ability was great, but why did his have to be eating demons? As he walked down the hallway, deep in thought, he suddenly ran into Kong. His heart nearly jumped out of his chest. Hell, he might as well have had a little heart pop out of his mouth like in a cartoon. Kong raised an eyebrow and asked if he was hiding in the bathroom. He admitted that he was, saying he had heard the alarm but ended up with food poisoning after biting into that thing yesterday. She sighed, shaking her head, saying that it seemed like he really wasn't cut out for this job. She explained that he didn't have to work for the government just because he had an ability. If he wanted, he could just sign a contract stating he wouldn't speak about what he had seen, and then he could live the rest of his life under government surveillance. Maru was caught off guard, expecting something a little more dramatic. Kong just shrugged, saying it was better than dying on the battlefield. She pointed out that people with weak mental fortitude didn't last long in this line of work. With the way he was acting, he'd probably be sent on a mission to save someone and end up letting them die by accident. If he couldn't handle it, then he should just quit now. She stepped in closer, looking him dead in the eye, and told him plainly that they had no use for people who were worthless. Meanwhile, at the office, Bachman was looking around, asking if anyone had seen Maru. Kong started wondering if maybe the guy really had given up. You'd think this was his big moment of motivation, but no, he was standing on a bridge, actually looking happy. Maybe he really wasn't supposed to be part of this mess. Maybe just living under surveillance was better than dying. Poor guy had no clue he was the protagonist of this story. Fate wouldn't let him off that easy. Right then, his phone rang. It was his mom. He picked up, still caught up in his own thoughts, answering with a distracted, "Hey mom, what are you up to?" She happily told him she was on a little trip to Mount Inwang. His entire brain shut down. What? He immediately slapped a hand to his forehead, groaning that he had already told her to stop climbing random mountains. The call was breaking up, but he heard her mention how weird it was that there was so much yellow dust in the air. Maru froze. Then the call disconnected. Hell no. That was all the motivation he needed. Meanwhile, on Mount Inwang, the security team was preparing for a demonic attack. One of the guards was standing still like a fool, staring into the trees. His teammate approached him, only to freeze in horror. A creature was sitting on a branch, gnawing on a human arm. It had a crystal embedded in its forehead. Then it turned to them and smiled. At that exact moment, Maru was sprinting toward the mountain. By the time he got there, the security team had already been wiped out. The Class C demon had torn through the rookies, leaving no survivors. Then, reinforcements arrived. The regional leader, a heavyset woman, stepped in. She activated her duplication ability, creating multiple copies of herself. "Call for backup," she ordered. "I'll hold it off." One of the guards ran off to use the emergency phone. Cell service didn't work here, so that was their only option. Meanwhile, at headquarters, Jung had just received the distress call and was briefing the team. The civilians in that area were in serious danger. If a level 5 demon made it to the city, it would be a bloodbath. There was no time left. They had to move now. But who had just arrived at the mountain, fresh out of a taxi, running at the speed of a slightly motivated turtle? Maru. He scanned the area, desperately looking for his mom. When he couldn't find her, he approached a guard and demanded to be let in. His mother was inside. The guard refused, saying it was too dangerous, that there were wild animals in the area. But Maru knew better. They weren't animals, they were demons. As the guards blocked the entrance, he was already making his way up the mountain. Climbing up a side route, he took the shortest possible path, hoping he wasn't too late. Deep in the forest, completely surrounded by the thick yellow fog, the most gangster mom in existence was standing tall. She was piggybacking another woman, offering to carry her down the mountain when she noticed something moving in the mist. Squinting, she muttered, "What the hell is that?" A hand shot forward. "Mom!" Maru had finally arrived, sprinting toward her, panicked. She looked up, confused, asking how he had found her. He explained that he had seen her social media post. She wanted to know how his job was going, but he brushed it off, saying that wasn't important right now. The other woman grinned, saying this must be the son she had been hearing about. She was happy for his mother. He got a government job already. His mom proudly confirmed it and added that now all he needed was a wife, though unfortunately, he wasn't very popular with the ladies. Maru gritted his teeth. "Can you both focus on surviving, please?" Then he noticed it. Something was above them, watching, waiting. Then, from the swirling fog, the demon descended, and it was staring directly at him. The moment Maru locked eyes with the demon, a full-blown panic attack hit him like a truck. His breathing became erratic, his chest tightened, and his mind screamed at him. How the hell was he supposed to protect his mother when just looking at a demon made him freeze up? If this kept happening, he'd be completely useless. Below, the other woman noticed something was off with him, saying he looked like he was about to collapse. His mother called his name in worry, and in that instant, the demon lunged straight for her, its grotesque claws outstretched. Maru's body moved before his brain could process it, launching himself toward her. But instead of heroically stopping the attack, he completely miscalculated his step and ended up rolling down the slope like a total idiot. It was too late. The demon was already upon her. She raised her arms defensively as the beast opened its jaws wide for the kill. Maru screamed for her, and then something unexpected happened. A sudden attack pierced through the monster's back, causing it to collapse with a howl of pain. Confused, Maru stared as blood dripped from the demon's body. Where had those daggers come from? His mother gasped at the bizarre sight, demanding to know what kind of nightmare creature this was and, more importantly, what was happening to her son. Maru's brain clicked. He looked at himself, at his hands, and then realized something insane. The knives embedded in the demon were his. He recognized them immediately. They were exactly like the weapons used by the first monster he had killed. His back suddenly tingled, and another dagger formed out of nowhere. Somehow, he could control them. Was this his ability? Up until now, he thought he only had the power to stop demons from regenerating when he ate them. But no, this was different. He wasn't just stopping their healing. He was absorbing their skills. A rush of confidence filled him. If he had this power, he could kill this thing. The demon, wounded and crawling away, was weaker than he expected. But if that was the case, then why had so many people on the mountain struggled against it? Something wasn't adding up. Elsewhere, one of the injured security team members was slumped against a railing, barely conscious. Two men from headquarters approached him, asking if he was okay. He was trembling, barely able to speak as he explained that the demon had obliterated his entire team. One of the officers stroked his chin, skeptical. "Hard to believe," he muttered. "The leader of this base is a level 7 user. How the hell did something like that take them out?" The second officer, a slick-haired man, demanded to know what kind of ability the demon had. The injured man shuddered and whispered, "It had a mirror. It could copy our attacks." At that exact moment, a glint of light flickered across the demon's back. Maru's stomach dropped. He had just landed an attack, and now it was being copied. Before he could react, the monster struck. Crystal daggers shot from its body, impaling him from all directions. Pain seared through him, but Maru had learned something about himself. He wasn't someone who went down easily. Gritting his teeth, he processed what had just happened. That thing mimicked his abilities. As the demon stalked toward him, he locked eyes with the glistening mirror embedded in its forehead. If that was the source of its power, then its ability must have been reflection-based. Testing a theory, he slowly raised his hand, curling his fingers into a fist. The demon did the exact same motion. His mind raced. If he attacked, it would counter with the same strike. He had to be careful. One wrong move and it could kill him with his own power. Behind him, his mother let out a pained gasp. One of her knees was bleeding. Maru rushed to check on her, and she waved him off, saying she was more worried about him. But he had bigger concerns. She wasn't healing. She couldn't regenerate in this environment. Maru took a deep breath, steadied himself, and then lifted his shirt, revealing his abdomen. "Don't worry," he reassured her. "I'm fine." His mother was momentarily distracted, marveling at his defined abs. "Damn, I raised a good-looking kid," she muttered. But Maru had no time for that. If he wanted to protect her, he had to kill this thing. No hesitation, no fear. He turned back to the demon, bracing himself. "Stay here," he ordered them. "I'll take care of it." His mother looked at him with pure concern, but he simply smiled. "I'm a public servant. My job is to protect civilians. This won't take long." Then he sprinted forward and tackled the demon off the cliff. His mother screamed as both of them plummeted down, a swarm of crows scattering into the sky. Maru managed to grab hold of a ledge on the way down, stopping his fall, but the demon wasn't so lucky. It crashed violently into the rocks below. Slowly, Maru pulled himself up, panting. His body was already regenerating from the damage. For now, the plan was simple: keep the demon as far away from his mother as possible. If he could buy enough time, the mountain team would arrive and finish it off. But up on the main path, the two officers who had arrived at the mountain were realizing something far worse. This wasn't just a single level 5 demon. There were more. All around them, creatures were emerging from the yellow mist, dozens of them, a horde of nearly identical demons, each one with the same features, the same eerie smiles. The bald officer grimaced. The leader of this mountain had a duplication ability. He muttered, "Looks like the bastard copied her." His partner cracked his knuckles. "Doesn't matter, we just kill them all." Without hesitation, he launched himself into the crowd, slamming his fist into the ground. A shockwave erupted, sending demons flying. The bald officer sighed. "Dumbass, if you don't find the original, they'll just keep multiplying." He scanned the area carefully. If the clones were here, the real body had to be somewhere. Meanwhile, below the cliff, Maru stared down at the demon. It was healing at an insane rate, just as fast as he was. But the difference was he was getting tired. Constant regeneration was draining his energy. This fight wasn't going to end easily. As Maru struggled to catch his breath, a chilling voice asked him what was wrong. His blood ran cold as he realized. It was the demon, mimicking his mother's voice. Furious, he shouted at the creature to shut up and hurled a dagger at it, but his aim was completely off. Controlling an ability he barely understood was proving to be a real challenge. The monster, however, had no such issue. It formed a crystal and launched it with perfect accuracy, striking Maru directly in the shoulder. Pain shot through him, fueling his anger. Without thinking, he retaliated with a flurry of daggers, managing to land a clean hit on the creature's shoulder. He celebrated for a split second, until the demon casually yanked the dagger out and healed instantly. That's when it clicked. They had the same offensive abilities, but its regeneration was far superior to his. No matter how many times he attacked, the monster would just heal right back. Then a memory surfaced, one of Kang Shona's lectures, one he had brushed off at the time. In his mind, she sighed in exasperation, scolding him for never listening properly. Back in reality, Maru was barely holding himself together. Maybe he really wasn't suited for this kind of work. But in his memory, Kang had extended a hand to him, pulling him up after a rough sparring session. She had told him that his problem wasn't just weakness, it was fear. Fear of getting hurt, fear of pushing his limits. She explained that as long as they were in the yellow dust, wounds would heal, so there was no reason to hesitate. The pain was unavoidable, but his body could endure it. And if he truly wanted to kill a demon, he had to sever its head and prevent it from using the dust to recover. Now, standing face to face with the demon, those words stuck with him. His ability was different. It made him the perfect counter to these creatures. He couldn't hesitate. He couldn't be afraid. If he had to eat monsters to survive, then so be it. The demon, still mimicking his mother, tilted its head and repeated the question, "What's wrong, Maru?" He had made up his mind. If precision was an issue, he would overwhelm it instead. He threw another dagger at the demon, which effortlessly dodged. But by the time it looked back up, Maru was already airborne, diving straight for it. The demon reacted quickly, activating the dust around it. It opened its massive jaws and bit down on Maru's dagger midair, stopping his attack. Worse, it reached out and grabbed Maru by the throat, lifting him off the ground. Bringing him close, the demon whispered, "Why do you keep struggling?" Then, using its immense strength, it slammed Maru into the ground, cracking the earth beneath them. Maru coughed, his body paralyzed from the impact. His breathing was shallow, and the crushing weight on his chest made it impossible to activate his Devour ability. He needed to eat part of the demon, but he couldn't move. The monster wasted no time. It sank its fangs into his neck. Pain exploded through his body. He was losing blood fast. In a desperate move, he yanked a dagger from his back and stabbed the demon in the ribs, forcing it to release him. Clutching his wound, he staggered backward while the demon simply watched him. His vision blurred, his legs wobbled, and then he realized he wasn't healing. Panic set in. His wounds weren't closing. Had the demon copied his ability to block regeneration? If so, then he was on a timer. With the amount of blood he was losing, he wouldn't last much longer. If he failed here, what would happen? Another memory. Kang Shona again, watching him struggle after another failed attempt. "How many times are you gonna pass out?" she asked, unimpressed. He tried to explain he had panic attacks. He couldn't control them. When they hit, his body shut down, his chest tightened, and his mind blanked out. Felt like death. But she had just crossed her arms and told him the truth. "If you don't get over it, you will die. And when that happens, everyone else will, too." Her words rang in his ears. "You are the last line of defense." If he failed, his mother died. The civilians on this mountain died. Everyone died. A familiar voice called out to him. It was his mother, searching for him. He barely had the strength to stand, let alone respond. The crystal still lodged in his throat made it nearly impossible to breathe. He had only one option left. The demon mimicked him again, copying his movements perfectly. Maru gritted his teeth. "Even if I die, I'll take you with me." With a roar, he bit down on his own lip, drawing blood, and charged. The demon mirrored his movement, lunging at him at the same time. As soon as it got close, it stabbed him again, a direct hit to his ribs. Maru smirked. That was exactly what he wanted. From the moment he had started fighting, he had been throwing daggers into the surroundings. And now, with both of them standing in the middle of the battlefield, he activated them all at once. Every single dagger he had launched came flying straight at them. The demon's eyes widened in realization, but it was too late. Blades rained down on them. Maru didn't care if they hit him, too. A final dagger, one he had thrown straight up into the air, came down in a perfect trajectory, piercing through the demon's skull, severing its head from its body. The monster twitched violently, blood pouring from its wounds. Couldn't regenerate, couldn't copy anything anymore. His head rolled to the ground. His body collapsed next to Maru. Exhausted, covered in his own blood, and barely conscious, Maru let out a ragged breath. It was finally over. As Maru stumbled backward, exhausted, the remaining demons in the area suddenly began to dissolve into nothing. The base operatives watching from afar saw the creatures vanish and immediately questioned whether the main body had been eliminated. One of them responded that no, something or someone had killed the source elsewhere. Now, they needed to find out who. Meanwhile, Maru's wounds were rapidly healing, his body recovering now that the monster was gone. But this time, it had been too close. He genuinely thought he was going to die. As he stood up, dazed and trying to steady himself, his father appeared in his vision, standing behind him. The familiar figure pointed at the demon's corpse and commanded, "Eat it." For the first time, things started making sense. Since the beginning, his father had constantly been telling him to eat, but now he understood why. Somehow, that man had already known. Maru hesitated, staring at the monster's remains. That thing had been incredibly strong, and its ability had been unique. If he consumed it, maybe he could gain another power, something that could help him survive. He remembered Diakman's ominous warning. A year from now, demons will rain from the sky. If that prophecy was real, then he needed to be stronger. He needed to be able to protect his mother. Determined, he crouched down and grabbed a piece of the demon's arm. With that, he began his feast. The grotesque sight of him eating demon flesh should have been disturbing, but instead, there was an odd sense of purpose. Maru had finally made up his mind. From this day forward, any powerful demon he came across, he would devour it. With newfound confidence, he licked his lips. Sometime later, his mother woke up in the hospital, confused about how she had passed out on the mountain. She wasn't too concerned, though, simply chalking it up to exhaustion. Maru was relieved. She didn't seem to remember anything. Logically, she should have witnessed the entire event, the demon standing right in front of her, but it seemed her memory had been wiped clean. He didn't want her knowing about any of it, so he simply showed her a news article covering the incident, warning her to stay away from dangerous places. That's when she casually mentioned that she had heard rumors about someone who looked like Maru's father being spotted in the mountains. That was why she went there in the first place. Maru's mind reeled. His father had disappeared on a mountain. Now, demons were appearing in those same mountains. Could there be a connection? A fragmented memory surfaced in his mind, a terrifying image. He saw himself as a child, standing in a forest, staring up in horror. Blood was everywhere. His father was having his arm eaten. The realization made his chest tighten. His breath became shallow, his vision swayed. Another panic attack. His mind spiraled, drowning in the memory of something he had buried deep inside for years. But before he completely lost control, his mother snapped him out of it, calling his name and asking why he had suddenly gone pale. To her, it probably just looked like he was overworked from his new government job. Struggling to regain his composure, he reassured her that everything was fine and forced a weak smile. Back at work, someone called out, "Officer Han Maru?" He was hiding behind his desk, looking guilty as hell, before awkwardly standing up and greeting the others. Diakman immediately asked where the hell he had disappeared to the day before. Before Maru could respond, Sen answered for him, sneering that it was obvious. The coward ran away like a scared little rat. Instead of explaining himself, Maru just bowed his head and apologized. Kong Shona, watching from the side, suddenly stepped in to defend him, saying that Maru had been sick, so she gave him a short leave. He blinked, completely caught off guard. Why was she covering for him? Kong didn't say anything, just silently giving him a look, warning him not to say too much. Diakman was surprised she had made a decision like that without informing anyone. He frowned, saying that a mistake like this couldn't just be brushed aside with a simple sorry. However, before the argument could escalate, the alarm sounded. Kong immediately switched gears, changing into her combat gear and announcing that they were going to eliminate a level 2 demon. Before she could take the lead, Maru suddenly shouted, "I'll go too!" The room went dead silent. Everyone turned to him, completely stunned. A few hours later, they were climbing the mountain toward their target. Maru, struggling to keep up, apologized to Kong for making her cover for him earlier. She shrugged it off, saying she knew she had been too harsh on him before, and it was partly her fault he ran away. But now she was curious. Why had he decided to come back? Maru, already out of breath from climbing, wiped his forehead and muttered that he was here to fight. That was when the familiar yellow dust started rolling in. Deep within the fog, a massive, bloated figure emerged. The ground shook with its footsteps as it charged toward them. A grotesque gray giant, round and thick, stomped its way forward, bellowing that it was ready for battle. Kong narrowed her eyes and warned the team, saying that even though it was only level 2, they couldn't underestimate it. The entire Inwang Mountain team had been wiped out by a single level 5 demon yesterday. Maru froze. That was the demon he had killed. TikToker EOK muttered that the mountain team had gotten lucky. The central team had killed the level 5 before things got worse. Those guys were all above level 7, so it made sense. Maru stood there trying to process. So they thought the central team had done it. He hesitated, wondering if he should say it was actually him. But then, he'd have to explain everything. And honestly, he liked the idea of getting recognition for his work. However, before he could even think about how to reveal the truth, Kong suddenly spoke. "Wait, what is that demon doing?" Everyone turned their eyes back to the monster. The huge, bloated creature was casually scratching its armpit. "What the hell?" someone muttered. Maru, stepping forward confidently, cracked his knuckles and said, "I'll handle this one." Kong blinked in surprise. The others were speechless. Sun scoffed. "What kind of level 1 ability user thinks they can take on a level 2 demon?" Maru pointed at himself and confidently declared that this guy right here, that's me. Standing face to face with the demon, he dramatically pushed his hair back. It was time to show off. Ever since he absorbed the mirror demon's ability, he had been evolving. Now, he had the chance to prove he wasn't just dead weight anymore. He rolled his shoulders, smirking as he spoke. "I'm not a useless member of this team anymore." The second he said that, an unbearable stench filled the air. The monster took one whiff and immediately started backing away in horror, screaming that this smell was supposed to be his own. Even Maru himself staggered from the sheer toxicity of what he had just produced, dropping to his knees and coughing. He had accidentally poisoned himself, but he refused to lose to a filthy monster like this. Ignoring the nausea, he charged forward, smacking the demon straight in the gut. The impact made the beast stumble, struggling to keep its balance. Meanwhile, TikToker EOK was pinching his nose shut, horrified. "This isn't an attack, it's biological warfare." Maru quickly glanced to the side and noticed Kong Shona wobbling on her feet. Even a level 7 like her was affected? He knew he had to help her stay upright, but at the same time, he was still locked in a battle. He gritted his teeth. He had to end this. Waving his arms wildly, he kept flailing in a chaotic dance, trying to overwhelm the monster. "I'm smaller, so I can move faster," he yelled. The demon, still mimicking him, began flailing as well. The two of them looked absolutely ridiculous, spinning in circles, arms swinging. Then, with a final burst of energy, Maru gathered all the yellow dust in the air and hurled it straight at the demon. The putrid mist engulfed the creature, making it gag and retch. Its body convulsed violently before it collapsed, foaming at the mouth. The battle was over. Maru turned to the others, grinning triumphantly. "I won, right?" Silence. No one looked particularly happy about his victory. Later, everyone was washing off in the river. Kong, arms crossed, observed Maru carefully. Then, without hesitation, she asked, "So you can absorb demon abilities by eating them?" Maru, still scrubbing himself down, nodded. "Yeah, looks like it. The last one I ate had a power that reflects enemy attacks." EOK immediately started mocking him. "You went on and on about proving yourself, and then, that's the power you used?" He burst out laughing. Maru, thoroughly embarrassed, turned red. "It's the best I had, okay? I worked with what I got." But Kong was unbothered. It doesn't matter. You did well. You're improving. Maru felt a warmth in his chest. Was she proud of him? His face heated up even more. Then she ruined the moment. But you're still disgusting for eating those things. Maru's heart shattered instantly. With that, they packed up and left to scout for more demons. As Maru walked, he muttered to himself, "Why, of all times I wanted to look cool, did I have to fight something that embarrassing?" That's when a voice suddenly called out behind him. "Are you Han Maru?" His stomach dropped. Maru immediately covered his face. "Who's asking?" The man stepped closer. "Jong Ildo." "I just want to confirm," Jong said, his gaze sharp. "You're the one who killed the level C demon on Inwang Mountain, correct?" Maru, hesitating for a moment, finally muttered, "Yeah, that was me." Jong nodded, satisfied. "Good. Then you're coming with me to the central headquarters in Seoul." Maru blinked. "A promotion? Why would someone like him get called there? You know about HQ, right?" Jong asked. Maru nodded slowly. "Yeah, it's where all the elite agents work." "So, why me?" Jong smirked. "Because I recognize potential." Maru stared at him. Was it just him? Or did this guy look way too cool? If the artists put less effort into this dude and more into certain other characters, that'd be great. Meanwhile, back at HQ, Yoon Ji-young was pacing in the office. "Why did you delay the meeting?" she demanded. Jong leaned against the table. "I found a recruit who caught my attention." Her expression darkened. "Don't tell me it's your son." The mention of Songwoo made Jong's jaw tighten. "No. He hasn't spoken to me since the divorce." Ji-young's gaze sharpened. "Then who is it?" Jong crossed his arms. "Another new recruit. And if I had to guess, I'd say the sudden increase in high-level demon appearances is connected to him." Ji-young frowned. "Are you serious?" Jong simply nodded. "Keep an eye on the island of Ghana. Something's going on there." At that moment, in a different part of the world, inside a decayed house, a thin, hunched creature crouched in the darkness. Yellow mist seeped through the cracks in the walls. Meanwhile, back at the police station, Maru was practically glowing with pride. He had been chosen to work at Central HQ. Him. This was insane. Then it hit him. Why did they pick him? The HQ meant more danger. The people there were top-tier fighters. That meant the threats were even worse. Maybe this wasn't such a good thing. He nervously muttered to himself, safety first, but damn, it does feel good to be recognized. Just as he was enjoying the moment, a shadow loomed over him. Songwoo. With a cold glare, Songwoo called him out. "What's with that dumb smile on your face?" Maru, still grinning, shrugged. "Oh, just got invited to HQ. Pretty cool, huh?" Songwoo's eye twitched. He clenched his fist. Maru raised an eyebrow. "Wait, you're mad? Don't tell me. You wanted to go to HQ, but they picked me instead." Silence. Then, in a flash, Songwoo stood up, seething. "Say that again." Maru had no interest in listening to a lecture from some sweaty armpit ability user. He was already irritated that word of his transfer had spread so quickly. The second he stepped into the office, he knew exactly who was responsible. Yok. Feeling Maru's murderous aura, the guy immediately bolted. Meanwhile, Diakman was cackling at the situation, watching the two idiots chase each other around. Dawn finally had enough and clapped her hands sharply. "All right, knock it off. Stop messing with the poor guy." Maru sighed in relief. "Wow, Dawn, you're actually a decent person." Before he could finish, she grinned and interrupted. "At least you're not hiding in the bathroom anymore. You even smell a little now. That's progress." His soul left his body. Would the embarrassment never end? On top of that, he couldn't stand how indifferent Kang Shona was. Even after all the progress he had made, she barely acknowledged him. He knew he had gotten stronger, but in this place, he was still just an incompetent rookie. Pulling out his phone, he stared at Jong Il-do's contact. The guy told him to message whenever he made his decision about moving to HQ. Maybe it was worth considering. Before he could dwell on it, Kang suddenly stood up. "A level 2 demon just appeared," she announced. Before Maru could react, Songwoo grabbed her arm. "This time I'll go," he said, smirking. "I'm sick of rotting away in this place." Then, as if to rub salt in the wound, he turned to Maru. "You're coming too. Gotta make sure the amateurs get along, right?" Maru felt his stomach drop. On the way to the site, the sun was scorching. Maru was already drenched in sweat, but Songwoo looked completely unbothered. If there was anything he enjoyed more than hunting demons, it was showing off. Maru, however, just wanted to end this quickly and go home. But then Songwoo suddenly stopped. His expression darkened. "This isn't going to be easy." Maru followed his gaze. A thick yellow mist was pouring out of an old house. This much dust. There could be more than one demon inside, Maru muttered. Songwoo, however, didn't care. He marched straight to the entrance. Follow me. Maru hesitated but had no choice but to go after him. Inside, the house was even worse than expected. The amount of dust was overwhelming. This feels more like a level 4 zone, Maru whispered. The two of them moved cautiously until they reached a green door. This thing is definitely inside, Songwoo muttered, gripping the handle. He twisted it, locked. Maru quickly stepped in front of him. Wait, this is dangerous. We don't even know what's behind there yet. Songwoo ignored him. He simply put on his gloves and said, if it won't open, I'll just break it. With that, he snapped his pinky finger. Maru flinched, expecting something crazy to happen. Nothing. Songwoo frowned. Maru grinned. For all that confidence, you couldn't even break a stupid lock? Annoyed, Songwoo leaned in to peek through the keyhole. Inside, he spotted a gaunt, sickly-looking figure crouched in the corner. Maru pushed him aside. Move, let me see. He squinted inside. The demon looked weak, almost pitiful. Songwoo scoffed. That thing? Don't be fooled. With this much dust, it's at least level 7. Maru's stomach dropped. Level 7? What the hell was something this strong doing on an island like this? Songwoo cracked his knuckles. Now I see why my heart's been racing. This thing is gonna be fun to kill. Maru, panicking, immediately tried to leave. Screw this, we need to call HQ. Now, he ran back to the front door, but when he grabbed the handle, it wouldn't budge. He rattled it harder. It was locked. His breath hitched. No. They couldn't get out. He turned back to Songwoo. The door's not opening. Songwoo barely reacted. Figures. He kicked the green door over and over, yelling at the demon to come out and fight. Meanwhile, Maru was frantically searching for another way out. He grabbed a chair and started smashing it against a window. Nothing. His heart was racing. Panic was setting in. They were trapped. Inside the green room, the demon's head tilted. Lonely, lonely, lonely. It kept repeating the word over and over, its voice distorted and eerie. Maru turned back to Songwoo and froze. His hand was broken. All 5 fingers snapped. And yet, the door hadn't taken a single scratch. What the hell is this thing made of? Maru muttered, sweat pouring down his face. He grabbed a chair and tried to bash the window again. Nothing. His breathing became erratic. The walls were closing in. Songwoo clenched his fist, teeth grinding. This bastard's ability must be something to do with isolation. A prison of some kind. Maru's chest tightened. The situation triggered a panic attack. Would HQ even realize they were missing? Time dragged on. 2 hours passed. Maru was furious. Had everyone forgotten about them? Back at the office, Diakman was stretching lazily in his chair. Then suddenly he froze. Wait! He glanced around. Where the hell are Maru and Songwoo? Dawn blinked. Weren't they doing fieldwork? Diakman's eyes widened. Oh crap, we forgot about them. Panic erupted. Everyone scrambled to check their files. Kong stood up immediately. She rushed to her desk, pulled out the mission report, and handed it over. The realization hit them all at once. They had sent 2 people to fight a level 7 demon, and then completely forgot about them. Diakman sighed heavily. Well, looks like we gotta go save those idiots. He turned to the team. All right, everyone, get ready. We're heading out. Adon leaned back on the couch, stretching lazily, and sighed. After a hard day's work, a cup of coffee is the way to go. Everyone finally relaxed for a second, enjoying a rare moment of peace. But then, a collective realization struck them like a lightning bolt. Where the hell were those 2? They had been gone for 3 hours. Adon smacked her forehead, cursing herself for letting the rookies go alone. With an annoyed sigh, she turned to EOK and ordered him to stay behind with Kong and another officer. Thank God, the goddess herself, Kong Shona, was staying. Seriously, the artist putting in that extra effort for her was a gift from the heavens. However, Kong immediately stood up. I'm coming too. I have a bad feeling about this. Dawn narrowed her eyes. That location is way too close to that other place. Are you sure? For a brief moment, Kong hesitated. There was something about that place, a weight in her chest. But then, without another word, she simply grabbed her gear and walked out. If I had to bet $1 trillion, I'd say Kang's family got wiped out by demons. That's why she's always so damn intense when it comes to hunting them down. Back at the house, the rescue team had just stepped inside. Where are those 2? Through the thick dust, 2 figures emerged. It was the idiots themselves, Maru and Songwoo, desperate, running toward them. Wait, don't let the door close. Slam. Too late. The door shut right in their faces. Maru collapsed to the ground in pure despair. Well, we're screwed. Adon crossed her arms. All right, what the hell happened? After getting filled in on the situation, Kong stepped forward, gripping her sword. Without hesitation, she unwrapped the bandages from her arm, revealing her cursed blade, and swung it straight at the door. Nothing, not a single scratch. Song-woo's confidence shattered instantly. Wait, even her attacks don't work? Dawn held up a finger. Let me handle this. She pulled back her sleeve, revealing a small black sphere on her arm. A tiny spider demon crawled out of it. Maru, horrified, watched her talk to it like it was a pet. Okay, yeah. Dawn is officially the weirdest person here. She tried sending her mini spider into the keyhole, but it didn't fit. Damn it, too big. Eoke was standing completely still. Song-woo snapped at him. Oi, TikToker, you gonna do something? Or just stand there? Eoke rolled his eyes. Unlike you psychos, I don't have a combat ability. Maru grinned. Ah, so you're completely useless. Eoke shot back immediately. Look who's talking, mister. I can absorb powers. Where the hell is your skill? Maru sighed. I need to see my target to use it, and the damn thing is locked away. At this point, it was clear. They were all useless. Song-woo clicked his tongue. Great. So, who's supposed to save us? Huh. Adon scratched her head. Well, the commander is out on a mission until tomorrow, so he's not coming. Eoke snapped his fingers. Wait, we still have King Ibak. An eerie silence fell over the room. A shadow appeared in the doorway. A frail-looking old man with glasses. Everyone jumped. When the hell did you get here? King Ibak tilted his head. Oh, I just arrived. No one came back, so I got curious. Zero presence. Absolutely none. This guy was a ghost in human form. He walked up to the lock and inspected it. Adon asked, "You think you can break it?" Instead of answering, he lay down on the floor and started taking a nap. Maru stared. Was this guy just that calm? Or did he have some insane ability? Even Adon sighed. No idea. We've never actually seen him fight. The so-called rescue team had zero progress. Song-woo groaned in frustration. So what now? Adon clapped her hands. All right, let's focus and find a way out. Song-woo scoffed. We already tried everything. You're just gonna sit there and wait to die? Adon snapped. Eoke grumbled. Why don't we just wait for the commander? Meanwhile, in the corner, Maru was biting his nails, but something felt wrong. He noticed Kong standing completely still. Why wasn't she doing anything? Before he could ask, boom, the entire house shook violently. Kong darted forward. It came from the main room. She burst through the door and froze. The entire room was shifting. The walls were getting smaller. The ceiling was coming down. Song-woo's face went pale. Wait, is this whole house shrinking? Maru's blood ran cold. Song-woo clenched his fists. The demon's ability finally makes sense. It was trying to compress everything until only its room remained, which meant they were all going to be crushed to death. Maru turned to the others. So what do we do? No one had an answer. For the first time, even Kong looked unsure. Maru needed a plan, fast. And then, a memory resurfaced. For years ago, two women were picking herbs in the mountains. A younger Kong ran up to them, her face bright with excitement. A girl, maybe her sister, turned and hugged her tightly. They were happy, a family living peacefully. Kong noticed something on the wall, a childish drawing. She frowned. Don't do that. Grandma will yell at you. The girl smiled mischievously. It's our family picture. See? Happy family. Back in the present, that exact same drawing was on the wall in front of them, and that wall was slowly closing in. It was clear now. This was the house where Kong grew up. The realization hit just as she activated her mummy's blade, slashing at the shrinking walls with everything she had. But the space kept closing in, and her sword began to crack under the pressure. She gritted her teeth, realizing she needed more blood to strengthen it. The cursed bandages wrapped tighter around her body, her neck already turning gray, veins pulsing unnaturally. Dawn immediately shouted at her to stop, saying this was getting too dangerous. Before Kong could push herself any further, Maru rushed forward and yanked her away, breaking the sword's connection. The moment it shattered, Kong collapsed, staring in despair as the house continued to shrink, erasing what little remained of her childhood home. She fainted in his arms. Dawn tried shaking her awake, but Maru knew she had pushed herself too far. Whether it was blood loss or the weight of her past, she had collapsed. But why had she fought so desperately for this place? That's when June revealed the truth. This house belonged to Kang's grandmother. She lost both her grandmother and her younger brother right here, in this exact house. She barely survived, and it was after that tragedy that she awakened her abilities. Maru finally understood. This was personal. At least for now, the house had stopped shrinking. But it was only a matter of time before it started again. They had to find a way out before it was too late. Dawn, analyzing the damage, muttered a saying under her breath. Soft water, hard stone. Strike it enough times and it will crack. The group took her words literally, hammering away at the walls. Hours passed. Song-woo, drenched in sweat, had chipped away at a tiny crack after what felt like a billion swings with his knife. Now completely exhausted, he tossed the weapon at Maru and muttered, "Your turn." Maru groaned, dragging himself up, his body aching all over. His throat was dry, but he had no choice. Just as he was about to swing, Kong snatched the knife from his hand. "I'll do it," she muttered, her voice hoarse. Maru panicked. "You need to rest. I'm fine." She dragged the knife across the wall, chipping away at it slowly. Watching her, Maru hesitated before bringing up something that had been on his mind. "I heard, this is your grandmother's house." Kong didn't react at first, just kept scraping the wall. Maru continued, "But if this place has been abandoned for years, why is it still so clean?" For a moment, she stopped. Then, without looking at him, she replied, "Because I come back. I've been waiting." "Waiting for what?" She exhaled, setting the knife down. "For the demon that killed my family to return." Maru stiffened. "You think it'll come back?" "I know it will." She looked at him for the first time, her golden eyes cold with certainty. Maru had no idea how she could be so sure. Kong continued, "That night, something was different. There were two demons. One was a female silhouette that emerged from the portal. I was too scared to move, but when I looked to the side, there was another. A male figure looked at me." She clenched her fists. "That thing wasn't just here to kill. It had another purpose. And if the prophecy is real, then it's only a matter of time before I see them again." Maru stared. He finally understood why she was here, why a level 7 soldier had been stationed in this backwater division. It was personal. "Are you disappointed?" Kong asked. Maru shook his head. "No. I'm just here because I suck at running away and the pay is good." She huffed a laugh before knocking on the wall again. "Then you'll be working in Seoul soon enough. The pay there is even better." He raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know that?" "I saw you talking to Jong Il-do that day." Before she could explain why she was so sure about him, the entire house shook violently. "Get to the hallway," someone shouted. The group bolted, sprinting for their lives. Amidst the chaos, Maru couldn't help but wonder, what had she been about to say? The next morning, the house had shrunk to half its original size. Everyone was exhausted, leaning against the walls, sweating and panting. "This has to stop soon, right?" someone muttered. Song-woo groaned, wiping his forehead. "Our only hope is the commander. Where the hell is he?" Meanwhile, King Ibak was still asleep, completely unbothered. Song-woo twitched. "I swear to God, this guy has been napping the entire time." As they spoke, the house shuddered violently again. Maru's stomach dropped. "We need to get Ibak out of this hallway." They rushed over to shake him awake, only to find him standing up, eyes open, covered in mold. He looked half dead, like a ghost. Everyone staggered back. "I think it's time," Ibak muttered. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the main door swung open, and out rushed the demon. It screamed in agony, flailing as mold and fungus spread all over its body. Ibak adjusted his glasses. "I have the mold demon's ability." He yawned. "It just takes a while to spread." Everyone stared at him in awe. Song-woo blinked. "Wait, you had a plan this whole time?" Dawn grinned. "Good job, old man." Ibak scratched his head. "I don't get compliments often." Song-woo, however, wasn't celebrating yet. "Focus up. We haven't won yet." They turned back to the demon, who was now trembling. It was crying. And then more creatures emerged from the darkness. A whole army of them. Maru's eyes widened. Solitaires aren't supposed to have friends, but the demon wasn't alone. The monsters charged forward, snarling. A thin red thread connected all of them, linked to the original demon's back. Kong reacted instantly. "EOK, get everyone to safety." EOK activated his ability, turning them all invisible. Kong rushed forward, her blade flashing as she sliced through the creatures. But the hallway was too narrow. Her sword kept getting caught on the walls, and now, with no room to dodge, they were completely trapped. As soon as the demons started swarming up Kang's sword, she braced for an attack, but before they could reach her, Maru threw himself into the middle of the chaos, taking the hits for her. He was being torn apart, his flesh ripped open by the creatures, but through sheer force of will, he reached up and grabbed the ceiling, using the mirror ability to keep it from crushing everyone. Iok screamed that they were all going to die, but Maru, gritting his teeth, declared that he wasn't letting that happen. Pushing his arms up, he stopped the ceiling from falling any further, straining every muscle in his body. His teammates cheered him on, but the demons weren't stopping. Just as another beast lunged for his throat, its head exploded. Songwoo had snapped a single finger. The guy smirked and told Maru to stay behind the barrier, since he was just a weak level 1. Maru was about to warn him to be careful, but it was too late. The demons pounced. Songwoo was immediately bitten, on the shoulder, arm, and stomach, the monsters tearing into him. And then, out of nowhere, thick white threads shot out, impaling the creatures. Jawan's tiny spider familiar had grown to a monstrous size. Her eyes were closed, but she was fully controlling the beast. Meanwhile, Kong kept slicing through the creatures, while Songwoo snapped more fingers, crushing their bones. Inside the barrier, Maru and Songwoo locked eyes. Despite the chaos, they grinned at each other. "Man," Songwoo muttered, "our team really works hard, huh?" "Yeah," Maru laughed, "we're totally badass." They were both losers. Dawn, however, wasn't as amused. She questioned why so many demons were still coming out of the room. The second Maru heard that, he realized what was happening. He sprinted out of the barrier. Kong called after him, but he shouted that he was going to end this. She cleared a path for him, cutting through the creatures so he could make it through. Maru pushed past the monsters, dodging their attacks, until he finally reached the hidden room. And there it was, the real demon. The original was crouched in the corner, watching. Maru finally understood. This bastard had only been sending out clones. Every time one of those growths appeared on its head, a new demon was born. Maru lifted both arms. "If that's the case," he muttered, "then I'll crush you right here." He activated the mirror ability and slammed the ceiling down. The room began collapsing instantly. Maru turned to run, but his own ability was too strong. The ceiling was falling too fast. He saw his friends through the shrinking doorway, reached out a hand, and at the last second, they pulled him through. As soon as he was out, the entire room was crushed. Outside, everyone burst into cheers. People praised his mirror ability, calling it incredible. Meanwhile, Kong stared at the ruins of the house. She thought about the memories she had there. Her grandmother, her brother. Maru noticed. He canceled his ability, realizing there was no point in keeping it active. Then, without hesitation, he walked up to the demon's corpse and started eating it. His teammates stared. "What the hell is he doing?" someone muttered. Maru ignored them. He had to devour this monster quickly while the yellow dust was still in the air. The moment he absorbed the ability, he tested it immediately. He pushed his hands against the walls. They began moving, but after just a few moments, his strength failed. The ability ate through the yellow dust too fast. That's when Kong grabbed his arm. "It's okay," she said gratefully. "Thank you." The little bit of space he restored was enough. For the first time in years, the old drawing on the wall reappeared. Her brother's drawing. Meanwhile, at the office, Diakman burst through the doors, grinning. "All right, guys, I got something good today." He looked around. No one was there. He held up a fancy loaf of bread from Busan, his face falling. "Where the hell is everyone?" He checked the time. Was this their break hour? He had woken up early just to buy this special bread for them. Just then, his phone rang. It was Jong Ildo. "What's up?" Diakman asked. Jong sighed. "I called Maru to transfer him to HQ. He refused." Diakman froze. "He what?" Jong sounded serious. "Find out why." Diakman hung up, puzzled. He looked across the room. The girls were asleep. Maru was knocked out cold, snoring. He was still covered in sweat and smelled horrible. "His life isn't perfect," Diakman muttered, "but he's getting comfortable with the team." 7 hours later, Maru's body was torn in half. Someone screamed for him to run, but rewind. 7 hours earlier, Maru was half asleep, stumbling through his morning routine. "When I started job hunting," he grumbled, "I never thought earning money would be this hard." He was still sore from the battle the night before. As he walked, a fancy black car rolled past him. Of course, it was Songwoo's rich bastard rival. "Maru, acting shameless, ran up to the car. "Hey, let me hit ya." The window rolled down. The guy glared at him, then he floored it. Maru choked on dust. Yoke appeared, laughing. "Man, I hate that guy. He's rich, has an imported car, and still works for the government? Why the hell does he even need money?" Maru nodded. "Yeah, something about him is weird." Yoke scoffed. "Doesn't matter. No matter how rich, tall, or good-looking he is, he has no friends." The two laughed together. Then Maru paused. "Wait, I have no money, no height, no car, and no friends. I'm just losing at everything." At the office, as soon as they arrived, Diakman ran at Maru, arms wide. "Our amazing level 7 user is back." Maru shoved him off. "What the hell are you talking about?" That's when Dawn grinned at him. "If you ate a level 7 demon and stole its ability," she shrugged. "Then congrats, Maru. You're level 7 now." As Diakman clapped Maru on the back, he laughed, saying he always thought the kid would just be dead weight, but now he was actually useful. Maru stood there, a bit dazed, realizing that being recognized by the team actually felt good. Even Songwoo, despite his usual arrogance, admitted that Maru's talent was impressive. He was the first person he'd ever seen who could just keep getting stronger. But before Maru could soak in the moment, Songwoo slammed the desk and barked that work had already started, so they needed to cut the chit-chat. Maru gritted his teeth. No matter what he did, this guy hated his guts, probably still bitter about the fact that he was getting stronger after being treated like a weakling. At that moment, Kong placed a hand on his shoulder. She asked if they could talk privately. They sat on a bench outside. Maru was still confused about what she wanted when she suddenly said, "After what happened at my grandmother's house, I'm sure of something." Maru froze. His heart started racing. What was she about to say? She turned to him and, with complete certainty, told him that he wasn't a level 1 ability user. The excitement died in his eyes. "That's it?" he muttered, completely deflated. He asked her to explain, and she said there was no way someone with a level 1 ability had his level of regeneration. Maru tried to argue that the first demon he ever ate was just a low-ranked, fat monster. Kong pressed him further, asking if he had seen any other demons before joining the squad. Maru's mind went blank. He was about to say no when suddenly, he noticed something behind her. A dark mist, then a massive black paw. A wolf-like figure, its mouth foaming, its eyes locked onto him. His chest tightened. The panic attack hit instantly. Kong noticed something was wrong and asked what was happening. He quickly shook his head, forcing a smile. He said it was nothing, just his mind playing tricks on him again. Without hesitation, Kong grabbed his hand. "You're safe with me," she said. Damn. Even Maru wished he could believe that. But one thing was clear now. There was definitely something inside of him. Before they could say anything else, Diakman suddenly appeared, smirking as he asked if they were done flirting. Maru instantly flailed, shouting that they weren't like that at all. Kong, completely unfazed, simply said that a year from now, demons would be raining from the sky, so relationships didn't really matter. Critical hit. Maru collapsed on the bench, staring at the sky. This hurt more than any demon bite. Even Diakman felt secondhand embarrassment. Maru tried to defend himself, mumbling that she had the wrong idea, but at the same time, yeah, that one stung. A little later, while checking the latest alerts, Maru and Kong headed up the mountain together. Since that brutal conversation on the bench, Maru had been feeling weird whenever he was near her. Kong started measuring the yellow dust levels, writing down some notes. Meanwhile, Maru steeled his resolve. Forget relationships. There was only one thing to focus on: how to kill these damn demons before the world ended. Just then, Kang's phone rang. It was Isaac calling for help. His voice was shaky. "The leader of Yokan has already been defeated. The demon is heading your way. Be careful with your words." And then the call cut off. Kang's expression hardened. Diakman was a level 10 ability user, and he had been defeated. Maru was just as shocked. Wait, that lazy guy was level 10? Then the air changed. The yellow dust began to thicken. Kong ordered Maru to stay alert. A dark figure started forming in the distance. And then, a thin, humanoid creature wearing a kimono stepped forward. The one-eyed demon smiled. "It's a pleasure to meet you, humans," he said. "Shall we have a little chat?" Maru and Kong both froze. This demon was different. Not only did he speak, but his words were eerily human. Kong, still on guard, warned Maru to stay cautious. The demon, however, raised a hand in a gesture of peace. "There's no need for hostility," he said smoothly. "I don't wish to fight." I just want to talk. Maru was still on edge, but he had a feeling this was an opportunity. Kong wasn't convinced. She remembered Isaac's warning. Don't talk to the demon, but Maru ignored it. If he could get information, then why not? So, he asked, where are you from? The demon's single eye gleamed. I come from Naraka, he said. Maru frowned. Where the hell was that? The demon's expression remained calm as he explained. Naraka is the deepest part of hell. It is a place where those who have committed the greatest sins are imprisoned in endless darkness and forced to fight for eternity. Maru listened carefully. Then the demon added, every demon you've ever encountered was once human. Maru suddenly realized if every demon was once human, then that meant he had been eating people this entire time. His stomach churned violently, and before he could stop himself, he vomited. The demon tilted its head and, with an amused chuckle, said, now it's my turn to ask a question. Maru barely had a second to brace himself before Kong grabbed his arm, her grip firm. She snapped at him to stop talking, reminding him that even if a demon seems friendly, it's still a monster. She was sure this one was the same demon that had taken down their leader. Without another word, she summoned her giant spear and lunged forward. The demon sighed. He told her to stop, saying he really didn't like violence. But Kong didn't hesitate. She charged in for the kill. He simply smirked. Killing me won't bring your little brother back. Kang's eyes widened. The demon casually flicked his finger, effortlessly redirecting her spear. You were weak, he continued. That's why he died. Her vision blurred. Memories of that day rushed in. Her little brother had stepped in front of her to protect her from the demon. Maru had never seen him before, but looking at him now, he kinda looked like Maru himself. Blood gushed from her brother's chest, and with his last breath, he told her to run. He collapsed into her arms. She screamed. Back in the present, Kong staggered back, blood dripping from her mouth. Maru's heart pounded. He called out to her and rushed forward, catching her in his arms. Where the hell did this blood come from? She had been fine a second ago. He turned to the demon. What did he do? Maru suddenly understood this wasn't a physical attack. The demon was messing with her mind. And if there was one person whose mind was already completely wrecked, it was Maru. The demon smirked and said they should continue their conversation now that they had gotten rid of the pathetic human. Maru's fists clenched. He gritted his teeth. Shut the hell up. The demon raised a brow. Maru rushed in. Before the demon could react, Maru's fist smashed into his head, sending him crashing into a boulder. The monster groaned, adjusting its jaw as it stood. Maru was already charging in for a second punch when the demon grinned. You sure are worked up over her, he mused. Aren't you the one she rejected? Maru froze. What? The demon continued. She literally just said a relationship with you didn't matter. And yet here you are, playing the hero. A single bead of sweat rolled down Maru's face. It didn't make sense. Why was his chest hurting? He never thought about her that way. She was just a cool senior, nothing more, right? Meanwhile, Kong, barely conscious, whispered apologies. But Maru couldn't process any of that. His heart clenched. And then blood poured from his mouth. He barely had time to react before the demon grabbed a stone from the ground. I hate emotions, the demon muttered, tossing the stone up and down. They make people weak. Even when I was human, I never felt a single one. He stepped closer to Maru. Why aren't you talking? The demon asked. Did the cat cut out your tongue? Maru's vision blurred. Now he understood. Even a level 10 couldn't handle this monster because it didn't just attack physically, it destroyed people mentally. The demon tossed the rock up one last time and then said, It's time to end this. Maru stood there, dizzy, heart racing. Unless someone cold-hearted and emotionless appeared right now, there was no way out of this. The rock plummeted toward his head. And then crack. The demon's entire body twisted unnaturally. Maru barely had time to process it before a familiar voice cut through the air. Why is this weakling lying on the ground? Maru's eyes widened. Songwoo. Maru let out a relieved laugh. For the first time in his life, he was actually glad to see this sociopath. But Songwoo just scowled. Why the hell are you smiling like an idiot? The demon cracked its neck back into place and chuckled. That was annoying, it said. Our vocal cords are hard to break, especially when you're this low level. Maru and Songwoo froze. Low level? This bastard was mocking them. Songwoo's fist clenched. Oh, you're asking for it, he muttered. Maru quickly warned him. This thing messes with your mind. Songwoo just smirked. Sit back and watch. I'll show you how to handle this. Maru had no choice. He knew he wasn't in any shape to keep fighting, so for now, he had to trust this lunatic. Song-woo cracked his fingers. The demon laughed and said, "Is that all you can do? You'll never get your father's approval like that." Maru's stomach dropped. Oh no. The demon was already getting inside Song-woo's head. Maru had assumed this guy had no weaknesses, but if he did, it was definitely something about his dad. Still, nothing happened. Song-woo simply kept cracking his fingers and kept attacking. The demon paused. "What's this? You really don't feel anything?" Song-woo just smirked. "Oh, I feel something," he said, smashing another punch into the demon's throat. "I feel like you talk too much." The demon stumbled but still managed to chuckle. "Ah," it sighed. "I see now. You really are just like me, a heartless monster, probably because of that mother of yours." "What was it again?" His grin widened. "Ah yes, she took her own life after being abandoned by your father." Maru's heart dropped. Wait, what? This whole time he just thought Song-woo was some rich, spoiled brat. But now he understood. This guy wasn't just cold and arrogant. He had been through some real shit. Maru braced himself, expecting Song-woo to finally snap. But instead, Song-woo simply shrugged. "What does that have to do with me?" And with zero hesitation, he punched straight through the demon's throat. "If only the strong survive," he said, "then I guess you won't be sticking around for long." Maru stepped forward, blocking the attack before it could reach Song-woo. He had already figured out the demon's pattern. It used psychological attacks to confuse its enemies, then followed up with a hidden blade strike from its mouth. At that moment, Kong rushed in, slicing through the monster's tongue. The demon shrieked, writhing in agony. She turned to Maru, concern in her eyes, and asked if he was all right. Maru, dazed and awestruck, could only think about how amazing she was. "Snap out of it, idiot. This isn't the time for that." He shook his head violently, trying to focus on the fight. Meanwhile, Song-woo was still shaken. The demon's words had hit him hard. Maru, seeing his reaction, smirked. "What? You jealous of me now?" Song-woo gritted his teeth. "As if you're still a weakling." Maru chuckled, mocking him further. "Wow, so you really think I'm better than you? That must hurt." Song-woo's eye twitched. "Shut up. You're a level 1 loser." The three of them turned their attention back to the injured demon. Kong stated they had to finish it before nightfall, otherwise, they'd lose their advantage. Maru wanted to know how they were supposed to pull that off. "If I get close, that bastard will just attack with its damn tongue again." Kong pointed out that now was the perfect time to strike. The demon couldn't use its voice anymore. Song-woo, however, wasn't convinced. "You're in no condition to fight." The wound on Kang's chest still wasn't healing. Maru ran off, calling back, "Then we'll just have to outsmart it." He waved his arms, yelling, "Hey, ugly, over here." The demon locked onto him immediately. That was exactly what Maru wanted. Song-woo watched, confused. "What the hell is that idiot doing?" Kong sighed, "Being an idiot." Maru called back, "Sun-woo, take care of Kong. I'll use my new ability." Song-woo narrowed his eyes. "What? That ability only works indoors, dumbass." Kong shouted at Song-woo. "Go help him before he gets himself killed." Maru sprinted across the field, dodging the demon's attacks, searching for a closed space. But there were no buildings nearby. His mind raced for a solution, until a car suddenly pulled up beside him. Song-woo, still inside, rolled down the window. "Get in." Maru glared at him. "What the hell are you doing? That car's expensive." Song-woo scoffed. "Are you getting in or not?" Maru had no choice. He leaped inside just as the demon lunged after him. The monster slammed into the car, but Song-woo hit the lock button, trapping it inside. Maru grinned. "Dumbass, you just walked into my trap." From outside, Kong and Song-woo watched as the car started violently shaking. Inside, the demon smirked. In one swift motion, it sliced through Maru's body, cutting him into pieces. Song-woo's eyes widened. Kang's heart stopped. The demon grinned triumphantly, stepping over the bloody remains. And then, a hand shot out and grabbed it by the throat. The demon's eyes widened, turned, and froze. Dozens of Maris were inside the car, swarming it from every direction. The real Maru was hidden deep inside, watching. "I told you," he muttered. "This is my domain now." The clones overpowered the demon, pinning it down. From outside, Song-woo slammed the car window. "What the hell is he doing in there?" Kong, equally worried, asked where Maru was. Inside, the demon struggled, panicked, gasping for breath. "We could have talked," it pleaded. "We didn't have to do this. Are you really this violent, just like your father?" The words pierced Maru's mind. A memory flooded in. His father, gripping him by the collar, screaming, "Stop crying, damn it." Tears welled up in Maru's eyes. The demon smirked. How did it feel, watching him disappear without a word? Maru gritted his teeth. He refused to listen. To block out the demon's voice, he punched his own ears, blood pouring down the sides of his head. I don't care about what you say, he growled. If I don't understand it, it doesn't mean anything. With one final motion, he clenched his fist, and the ceiling of the car began to collapse. From outside, Kong panicked. Stop! The dust is fading. He's losing control. Songwoo grabbed her arm. There's nothing we can do. He's already dead. The car crumpled in on itself, flattening completely. A massive cloud of dust rose into the air. Silence. Kong ran forward, pushing debris aside. We have to save him. Songwoo shook his head. He's dead, Kong. That idiot got himself killed. Kong refused to believe it. As long as there's dust in the air, there's still a chance. She began tearing the wreckage apart, searching for any sign of Maru. And then a faint, muffled sound. She froze. Songwoo's eyes narrowed. They both heard it. A heartbeat. A weak, struggling, but undeniable heartbeat. Without hesitation, Kong ripped open the wreckage. And deep inside the twisted, crushed remains of the car, something was knocking. Maru found himself floating in a vast, empty void, weightless, disconnected from his own body. It was as if his very existence was fading, his consciousness barely clinging to reality. Somewhere in the distance, he heard a voice. The abyss is calling for you. Remember the summons. Maru's thoughts were sluggish, his mind struggling to grasp what was happening. What summons? Before he could make sense of it, the monster's voice roared through the void, commanding him to wake up. His eyes shot open. The world around him was red, distorted, and pulsating like a living organism. His stomach churned, twisting unnaturally. And then, from deep within his own body, a hand emerged from his abdomen. That same black-furred beast from before, it was crawling out of him. Panic surged through him as he staggered backward, staring at the creature in horror. What the hell is this? The monster loomed over him and spoke. Do you remember? A buried memory resurfaced. Maru saw himself as a child, standing face to face with this very creature. His father stood beside him, cold and emotionless. Dad, this thing is dangerous. We should run. But his father grabbed him by the collar, dragging him forward. No, his father had said, his voice sharp and final. From today onward, we fight. You need to obtain this bastard's unique ability. Young Maru screamed in terror as his father threw him forward, directly in front of the monster. The beast's jaws opened wide, ready to consume him whole. Back in the real world, Songwoo was kicking through the wreckage of the destroyed car, searching for Maru's remains. The yellow dust had faded. There was no sign of recovery. Songwoo exhaled through his nose, accepting the inevitable. He's dead. But Kong refused to believe it. She reached into the rubble, desperately searching. Maru, if you can hear me, answer me. Then, a twitch. Kong froze. Songwoo's eyes widened as they both saw it. Maru's finger moved. And then, something even more unsettling happened. Maru's body began producing yellow dust. Right in front of them, his shattered bones twisted and reassembled. His wounds stitched themselves shut. His organs, his very body was regenerating without any external dust. Songwoo took an involuntary step back. What the hell? Kong, wide-eyed, gripped Maru's hand. You're okay. You're going to be okay. But Songwoo wasn't convinced. He narrowed his eyes. Kong, do you realize what this means? Maru collapsed. His body had recovered, but he had lost consciousness. Songwoo stepped forward and grabbed him by the collar, shaking him violently. What are you? Maru groaned, half-conscious, barely able to understand what was happening. What? Songwoo's grip tightened. How the hell are you producing your own yellow dust? Kong immediately stepped in, prying Songwoo away from him. That's enough. You think that's enough? Songwoo snapped. Are you blind? This isn't normal. No one, not even demons, can do this. Kong stared him down. Even if that's true, Maru clearly doesn't know what's happening either. Until we understand, this stays between us. Songwoo clicked his tongue, frustrated. That's insane. What if he turns into something dangerous? Then I'll deal with it, Kong said firmly. There was a long pause. Songwoo sighed, shoving his hands into his pockets. Fine, I don't care what happens to him anyway. He turned and walked off, leaving the responsibility squarely on Kang's shoulders. On the train ride home, Maru sat slouched in his seat, completely drained. His mind was spinning. What the hell is happening to me? He thought about his Gula ability. He thought about the black-furred beast. He thought about his father. Then, suddenly, his reflection in the window shifted. He jerked back in shock. The monster was staring back at him. His heart pounded, panic creeping in. Song-woo, sitting nearby, glanced at him. "Stop looking so weird." Maru forced himself to breathe. I just saw something strange. Whatever. Not my problem," Song-woo muttered, returning to his phone. Maru sighed. "No one in this damn job cares about me." At that moment, Isak's phone rang. Maru overheard a name. "King Udiu." He frowned. "Who?" The scene shifted to a dimly lit bar. Sakia. A man with a strong presence sat at a table, talking. "Just quit. Get out of the Inwang Mountain Division and request a transfer." The man across from him, a nervous-looking recruit, fidgeted. I understand, but, who is that guy next to you?" The camera panned. Sitting there, looking completely out of place, was Maru. Even Song-woo, who had been dragged along, looked annoyed. "Since when were you invited?" Maru shrugged, dead inside. "I'm having a rough time. I don't want to be alone." He then turned to the nervous recruit and squinted. "So, you want to transfer?" The recruit nodded hesitantly. "Yeah, there's a lot of fighting in my division. Arguments, bullying, conflicts. It's exhausting." Song-woo scoffed. "Sounds more like a one-sided bullying situation." Maru leaned forward, intrigued. "Wait, is this that legendary office bullying I've always heard about?" The TikToker nodded in agreement, saying that Ju was too soft and should have just burned everything down and left, just like he did. Maru, still confused, asked about the man sitting across from them, and it was revealed that Isak was once the most bullied among them. That realization sent a shiver down Maru's spine. Who were these people? Exactly. The explanation continued. Even among government officers tasked with eliminating demons, there were people who were more dangerous than the creatures themselves. Maru remembered what Sian-woo had said earlier, that he might become more dangerous than the monsters. That thought unsettled him. As they walked home, Ju led Maru through the dark streets, complaining about the distance. Eventually, they arrived at his parents' shop. Ju invited him inside, but before they could enter, his expression changed. A group of men was waiting for them. Maru barely had time to process it before a giant man, nearly 2 meters tall, stepped forward. He wasn't looking for Ju specifically, but he found Isak instead. Without hesitation, the man kicked Isak in the chest, slamming him into the ground, then stomped on his head. He accused Isak of trying to leave quietly when the real problem was that he burned down their place before running away. The brute kept kicking and stomping, his heavy boots pressing down on Isak's skull. The smaller man barely managed to choke out a response before another blow landed. Maru, clenching his fists, grabbed the attacker's wrist and demanded that he stop. The man turned, towering over him, grinning. His knuckles cracked as he sized up Maru. With a single punch, he sent Maru flying. Maru crashed to the ground, dazed. Blood trickled from his nose, and the impact rattled his skull. The brute laughed, saying that only idiots and weirdos ended up in Ghana Island Squad. Then, without hesitation, he stomped down on Isak again. As Maru struggled to his feet, he noticed something strange. A faint, yellow mist had formed inside his mouth. The air was thickening. Something inside him stirred. The attacker continued beating Isak mercilessly, ranting about how he had to go through months of rehabilitation because of him. Meanwhile, the other members of the gang stood nearby, smirking. They weren't going to help, they just watched. Then the shop's front door creaked open. A shadow loomed. The gang leader turned, just in time for a massive foot to slam into his face. The brute flew backward, crashing into the wall. Everyone turned to see who had just arrived. It was Sian-woo. He casually dusted off his shoe and told Maru to stop messing around before he ended up dead. Maru quickly swallowed the yellow mist that had started forming. Sian-woo explained that he had been following him, just in case he caused trouble. But he wasn't the only one. Another presence was nearby. Sian-woo glanced toward the corner of the shop. A familiar figure had been watching from the shadows. It was Kang Shana. She had been following them the entire time. Her expression darkened as she entered the shop. Without hesitation, she rushed over to Isak, checking his injuries. She confirmed that he was still breathing before turning to the gang leader. Her gaze was cold, but before she could speak, a woman in military fatigues stepped forward. She wasn't backing down. She said if Kang was taking Isak away, then she would need to pay for what had happened here. One of the nerdier thugs, trembling, pointed at Sian-woo. Apparently, he had also caused trouble for them in the past. Xianwu scoffed and said he was just here to discipline some idiots. The woman sneered, saying it was their turn to receive discipline now. Before the situation could escalate, the gang leader got back on his feet. His face was twisted with rage. He locked eyes with Xianwu. Without hesitation, he charged forward, fists raised. Xianwu grinned. The fight was about to begin. Maru froze. He wasn't sure if he should interfere. Kong grabbed his arm. She whispered that he couldn't transform here. If he lost control, things would get dangerous. Then, without warning, the gang leader lunged. He grabbed a chair and swung it straight at Xianwu's head. But before it could connect, a wooden broomstick slammed into his ribs. The impact was brutal. The gang leader stumbled back, clutching his side. Kong stood firm, her weapon raised. The second thug tried to retaliate, but Kong swept his legs out from under him. The nerdier thug collapsed, writhing in pain. She calmly warned them to stop before things got worse. Then, someone new entered the shop. An older man. He looked at the scene with disapproval. He wasn't happy. He wasn't neutral. He was angry. He demanded to know why they were fighting civilians. Everyone went quiet. Kong turned to face him, ready to explain. But the moment she spoke, he punched her in the face. The blow was ruthless. Kong staggered back, blood dripping from her lip. The room fell silent. The old man adjusted his collar and looked down at her. He said she wasn't a civilian, and that she had no right to lay a hand on his subordinates. Xianwu, looking battered but unfazed, stepped forward and casually remarked how long it had been since he last saw them. Maru, on the other hand, turned his gaze toward Kong, bruised and bleeding, and something inside him snapped. His body reacted instinctively, absorbing the yellow mist that filled the air. There was no way he was going to stand by while these guys beat up his senior. Xianwu immediately warned him to stop, saying it was reckless, but Maru was already moving. Without hesitation, he launched himself at the enemy leader. The older man didn't seem fazed, but before he could react, Maru's fist crashed into his face, sending him spinning across the room. His head smashed against the wall, leaving a deep crater in the concrete. Everyone in the room froze. Maru, still breathing heavily, continued exhaling and absorbing the yellow mist. Xianwu clicked his tongue. The situation had officially gone out of control. Ignoring everything else, Maru knelt down beside Kong, helping her sit up. She, however, wasn't pleased. She told him not to use the mist, but he simply apologized. He had lost his temper when he saw her getting beaten. The gang leader, still slumped against the wall, suddenly started laughing. He wiped the blood from his mouth and pushed himself up, visibly excited. To Maru's horror, he was absorbing the yellow mist too. The man stepped forward, smirking. He admitted it was impressive. He had never seen a human who could produce and exhale the mist like a demon. Then, without warning, he appeared right in front of Maru. The room went silent. He tilted his head, studying Maru closely. Then, with genuine curiosity, he asked what he was. He even offered him a spot in his group. Maru's mind immediately flashed to the people in this group, people worse than demons. Disgusted, he flat out refused. The gang leader chuckled, saying that was a shame. He couldn't just let Maru walk away now, not after revealing his abilities. Now that the room was flooded with mist, they might as well settle things properly. His proposal, a 3-on-3 match, Jawang Mountain versus Ghana Island. Fighting only demons was boring, after all. Kong immediately opposed it, but he ignored her. He laid out the rules. No killing. First team to surrender loses. If they won, they'd take Isaac and keep Maru's secret. Because once the higher-ups found out about his mist-producing ability, there was no way they'd let him roam free. Maru and Xianwu exchanged glances. They hated that this guy made sense. Kong, knowing she was being ignored, sighed in frustration. Xianwu was already rolling up his sleeves. He was excited. Fighting another human with abilities was a rare treat. Maru immediately told him he was crazy, but Kong cut in. She actually agreed to the fight. Maru and Xianwu stared at her, confused. She said they just needed to buy time. Neither of them understood what she meant, but for now they trusted her. The gang leader grinned. He asked who would go first. Xianwu immediately stepped forward. The leader looked at his team and called for a challenger. First, no one moved. Then, a nervous-looking man removed his glasses. The moment he locked eyes with Xianwu, something changed. A demonic glint flickered in his pupils. The man immediately analyzed Xianwu's power. He explained that Xian Wu's ability allowed him to break his own bones to strengthen his attacks. A massive man, nearly 3 meters tall, stepped forward next. He cracked his knuckles, calling dibs on the fight. Without hesitation, branches and vines shot from his fists, twisting towards Xian Wu's throat. Xian Wu, unimpressed, broke one of his fingers, shattering the incoming attack. He barely moved. The giant grinned. Of course, it wouldn't be that easy. Suddenly, the broken vines reformed and wrapped around Xian Wu. His arms were pinned. The branches hardened, forming a wooden coffin. He couldn't move. The brute grinned, stepping forward and placing a finger against Xian Wu's forehead. With his opponent trapped, he whispered this was the end. A single strike to the brain and it would be over. Xian Wu laughed. The next moment, he bit down. Crack. One of his teeth shattered. And with that, the entire coffin exploded. Before the brute could react, Xian Wu grabbed his throat. With terrifying precision, he pressed down on the man's spine. The brute collapsed instantly. His legs went limp. Xian Wu let go, watching as his opponent fell to his knees, twitching. Then, with an eerie smile, he leaned in close. He told him to stand up. The brute tried, but his body didn't move. Xian Wu laughed. He reached forward and placed a finger against his opponent's neck. He warned him, if he didn't fight back, his next target would be his cervical vertebrae. The brute gasped, choking on his own saliva. He collapsed, face first, unconscious. Kong immediately rushed in, grabbing Xian Wu's wrist. If he kept going, he was going to kill him. Xian Wu finally backed off, rolling his shoulders. Round 1 was over. Ghana Island won. The gang leader sighed, as if disappointed. Then, without missing a beat, he smiled and asked, "Who was next?" Kong turned to Xian Wu, frustrated. He had gone too far, and worst of all, he barely bought them any time. The leader of the opposing team stepped forward, calling for the next challenger. One of his men analyzed the situation and revealed that their fighter had the ability to turn her own blood into blades. Xian Wu and Maru exchanged glances, making a quick remark about how this was a perfect fight since there were no losers in a battle between beautiful women. The female fighter, now revealed to be Kim Maro's heir, pulled out 2 shards of her ribs and readied herself. Kong, however, advised against using blades, saying it would be too dangerous. The opposing fighter ignored the warning and began summoning skeletal limbs from her back, climbing on top of what appeared to be an arachnid-like skeletal structure. She made it clear she didn't care. Without hesitation, she lunged at Kong. Kong barely had time to react. She managed to form a short blade just in time to block the first attack. They clashed for a moment before the skeletal fighter struck Kang's ribs. 10 seconds into the fight, Kong realized she wouldn't last long at this rate. She swiftly countered, landing a quick cut on her opponent. The skeletal fighter staggered backward. Kong seized the moment and went for a light slash, intending only to create distance. But blood gushed. Her light slash had created a pool of blood. Even the opposing team called out to their fighter, concerned. Kong, shocked, apologized, saying she hadn't meant to cut that deeply. Maru and Xian Wu praised her. She had successfully bought a lot of time. Kong, however, seemed uneasy. This was the first time she had fought another human. The enemy team gathered their fallen fighter. One of them, the man with the analyzing ability, seemed unnerved. He had heard that Ghana Island only had weaklings, yet the fight had completely flipped his expectations. The gang leader remained in place, unfazed. He then announced that the fight wasn't over. Kong immediately protested. It was 2-0. They had already won. But the gang leader merely smirked. He admitted that the entire tournament was meaningless. He only wanted to see Maru fight. Besides, this next fight would be worth 3 points. Kong objected again, but before she could refuse, Maru stepped forward. He accepted. The fight was on. However, he had one condition. He wanted to fight the leader himself. The entire room went silent. Everyone thought he was insane. The gang leader simply grinned. Before he could answer, the analyzing fighter activated his ability on Maru. And in that instant, his eye began bleeding. He froze in place, sweating. What he saw inside Maru's soul wasn't normal. The demon in his eye screamed. He asked, "Was that thing really human?" Maru, meanwhile, stood at the edge of a nightmarish void. The gang leader walked up to him, casually remarking that fighting the judge was unnecessary. Instead, he would choose an opponent for him, and that opponent was Udu. The overweight, nervous recruit stiffened. He pleaded with the leader to reconsider. The leader ignored him. Instead, he shoved Udu forward and told him to fight. If he performed well, he would grant him a transfer. Maru hesitated. Something felt off. Then he saw it. Behind Udu, the same monstrous vision appeared. The entity whispered words into Udu's mind, the same way it had whispered into Maru. Except this time, Maru could hear everything. The whispers spoke of self-loathing, regret, and fear. It was telling him, "You deserve to die." Then the entity dug deeper. It reminded Udu of his past, his days of watching COK get bullied, and how, secretly, he had enjoyed it. Maru felt his mouth opening on its own. Something was forcing him to speak. A blade began forming in his throat. Desperate, he clutched his own jaw shut, but the words still forced their way out. He accidentally cut Udu right across the heart. Udu collapsed instantly. Maru, panicked, rushed forward to help him. The dying boy managed to whisper, "I'm sorry." Before Maru could process what he meant, boom, Udu exploded. Venom erupted from his body, spreading throughout the room. The acidic poison burned through Maru's skin, melting his flesh. Kong screamed his name. The gang leader stepped forward. He told everyone to stay out of it. The fight wasn't over. He knelt beside Maru's crumbling body, casually observing the damage. He calmly explained that Maru's internal organs would soon start dissolving. But, of course, he still had the option to surrender. Maru, barely holding himself together, refused. The gang leader grinned. He said he was curious to see another one of Maru's abilities. All he had to do was finish Udu off. That would secure his victory. Maru, despite his condition, spat out blood. He said the rules didn't matter. If he was gonna fight, he might as well go after the leader. He lunged forward, fist aimed at the gang leader's head. The gang leader sighed. He grabbed Maru's collar midair. Then, before anyone could react, he said a single word, 8 times. Boom! Maru slammed into the ground. Not just Maru, everyone. Kong, Xianwu, the entire room, all were pinned to the floor. Even Xianwu, struggling against the force, couldn't breathe. COK, gasping for air, told them to focus on their breathing. Because the gang leader was a rank 9 ability user, and his power was gravity. Standing above them all, he laughed. From his vantage point, with everyone at his feet, crushed under his control, he remarked, "This view is truly beautiful." This, he decided, was where the real fun began. The leader of the opposing team noticed that Maru had already recovered and sensed that something was off with his body. To test it, he increased the gravity specifically for Maru, causing his ribs to crack instantly. However, after what had happened in the car, this level of pain wasn't anything new. The leader then observed that the more Maru suffered, the denser the yellow dust around him became. This confirmed his suspicion. The demon Maru had absorbed was special. Maru recalled the nightmarish monster that had been haunting him. Unlike the other demons, this one had eyes filled with something different, something deeper. As he struggled to push himself up, he felt like he was training under 100 times gravity, straight out of a battle manga. He decided to test his power of words on the enemy, but there were no visible words on the leader's back. That meant he couldn't attack him psychologically. This guy was a true lunatic, completely unfazed. The leader, growing more curious, pulled out a small knife. He casually mused about how he hated being left wondering. Maybe he should cut Maru open to get some answers, perhaps take out a lung, or maybe his throat. But before he could move, his knife shattered. Xianwu, from the side, had snapped his own finger, triggering his ability, sending the force straight into the knife. Kong immediately followed up, cutting the leader's arm, then launching herself toward him with an aerial attack similar to a certain Nen-using hunter. Just as she was about to land the strike, the leader activated his ability. Gravity increased 20-fold. Everyone hit the ground instantly. Kong collapsed, struggling to breathe. The leader calmly remarked that with gravity this high, oxygen would soon run out. Eventually, she would pass out. Maru called out to Kong, but the leader ripped the knife from her hands and said that now, no one would get in the way of his fun. Maru frantically searched for a way out. This bastard's power worked in a way that the more he restricted himself, the stronger he became. It was insane. Then, someone knocked on the door. The leader sighed, telling them that they were closed. But something blue seeped through the door. A strange mist crawled along the floor. Xianwu, struggling on the ground, wondered what the hell was happening. Kong, however, relaxed. He finally arrived. She had sent a message earlier. The one person who could flip this situation was here. At the entrance stood Diakman. Blood dripped from his eye socket. His ability was the Demon of Darkness, and if a power had darkness in its name, things were about to get insane. The room was swallowed by pure blackness. Inside the abyss, Maru found himself submerged. The leader, too, was consumed by the darkness. Maru realized something was deeply wrong. In this void, there was no sound,
no scent,
no sense of presence. It was almost as if he himself didn't exist. The leader of the opposing team tried to understand what was happening. Then, Diakman appeared behind him, gripping his throat. Inside this darkness, gravity had no meaning. The leader was thrown to the ground like a rag doll. Meanwhile, Diakman appeared next to Maru. Maru, barely conscious, reached out for help. Diakman, expressionless, grabbed his neck and choked him out. Then, reaching into his own eye sockets, he pulled out 2 darkened orbs and slotted them back into place. The darkness began to fade. Everyone returned to reality.
Diakman exhaled.
Finally, the yellow dust had stopped spreading. Kong sighed in relief and thanked him for arriving, but he ignored her. He walked straight to her and Xianwu. Then, coldly, he demanded to know, "Why didn't either of you report Maru's powers?" Kong hesitated. Diakman wasn't playing around. If they had hidden something as serious as a human producing yellow dust, they had betrayed protocol. Kong apologized and asked if they could talk things through. Diakman shut that down immediately. It was too late. Things had already gone too far. A few hours later, inside a towering government facility, Maru sat chained to a chair, glancing around anxiously. A massive council chamber with 88 seats, but only 4 people present. Jung sat at the head of the room. She coldly declared that from now on, they would personally oversee Maru's fate. However, Diakman immediately objected. He refused to let that happen. Jung slammed her hand on the table. Maru was producing yellow dust. If word of that leaked, people would see him as a demon. It was a serious risk, but Diakman crossed his arms, unfazed. He countered that the entire incident happened because of that other team. Everyone in that squad was dangerous. Even Jung himself had to know that. If anyone needed to be held accountable, it was Jung for allowing those lunatics to operate freely. Jung snapped that he was going too far. Jung, however, simply told her to stay quiet. It was true, he didn't care about his soldiers' personalities. It didn't matter if they were from Mount Go Wang or if their leader was a psychotic maniac. They were necessary. At the end of the day, those monsters were better than the current leader of Ghana Island, a level 10 user who refused to fight. Diakman sighed and accepted the jab. Then, looking straight at Jung, he said, "And Maru doesn't like fighting either. That's why he needs to stay in Ghana." Diakman stated that Maru staying in Ghana was the best option. The 2 people closest to him, Kong and Xianwu, were the ones keeping him stable, preventing any uncontrolled outbreaks. Zhang, however, questioned whether Diakman would take full responsibility if Maru ever caused an incident. Without hesitation, Diakman stood up, agreed, and walked out as they exited. Zhang called for Xianwu to stay behind. Maru glanced back, but it was clear this was a father-son conversation. Outside, Maru wanted to know how things went, but also couldn't help but comment on Diakman's ridiculous tie. His boss ignored the remark and casually dropped the bombshell. Maru and Kong were getting disciplinary action, plus a salary cut. Maru was devastated. He dramatically clutched his chest, mourning his financial loss, but Diakman reminded him that he was lucky. The higher-ups were already unhappy. If he caused another mess, even Diakman wouldn't be able to protect him. Inside the room, Zhang stared at Xianwu, then asked a single question. If Maru lost control, could he kill him? Xianwu hesitated before muttering that he couldn't. Zhang sighed, stood up, and turned away, saying that after 20 years apart, this was his answer. He started to leave, but then he stopped. He ordered Xianwu to sit down. This wasn't a father-son conversation. It was an order from the director. Maru wasn't just a regular ability user anymore. A human producing yellow dust was the same as a demon. They had to prepare for the worst, because he could very well be their enemy. Meanwhile, Maru arrived at his new dormitory. It was Diakman's place. Trash covered the floor, soju bottles stacked in the corners, and it looked like a war zone. Maru stood at the entrance, horrified. Diakman grinned, announcing that from now on, they'd be roommates. Maru instantly wanted to leave. He tried to negotiate, asking if he really had to stay there, but Diakman shut him down. This was the only way to keep an eye on him 24/7. Maru froze when Diakman put a hand on his shoulder. A wave of trauma hit him. The image of his father flashed through his mind. Back at the base, Jinwoo watched him closely. Maru, exhausted, asked if she had something to say. She did. If he ever released yellow dust inside the building, she would kill him. Suk muttered that it was cruel to treat Maru like this. If they kept pressuring him, the dust would only come out faster. Maru gritted his teeth. He had no idea who he hated more at this point. Then, as he let out a deep breath, King Ibok asked if he just released dust. Diakman grabbed Maru's mouth. Instantly, the scene was incredibly questionable. Maru, muffled and struggling, realized that this was his life now. As he wandered the halls, frustrated about being treated like a monster, he ran into Sianwoo. Remembering Zhang's words, eyed him carefully. Maru, already irritated, snapped, asking if Sianwoo was also there to lecture him. But Sianwoo simply replied that he didn't care about him. That response only pissed Maru off more. He had a way of getting under his skin every single time. Then, out of nowhere, King Wooju appeared. He had transferred to their office. Kong explained that, since it was his first day, he could ask questions if he had any. She then turned to Maru. She wanted to check his eyes. Maru, confused, said he wasn't releasing any dust. Kong, however, got closer. She reassured him. No one was against him. Everyone was just on edge. If something like the last incident happened again, they wouldn't be able to protect the island. Maru, hesitant, admitted he understood. Left alone in the office, he thought about how, despite working harder than anyone, he was being kept out of missions. Diakman's way of handling things was simple. Just don't send him out at all. Suddenly, two men walked in. Maru turned, asking who they were. The response? A sucker punch straight to the face and instant beatdown. Maru barely had time to react before they pinned him down, screaming at him to release yellow dust. The bald one barked the order while the one with a wig helped hold him down. Maru was ready to retaliate, but then remembered Kang's words. He couldn't make trouble anymore. The wig guy demanded that Maru let out the dust, or else they'd crush his head. Then, suddenly, Baldy smashed a fist down, sending Maru sprawling across the floor. But then, the bald guy helped him up. He casually apologized, saying that his friend was a bit too aggressive. They introduced themselves as the double standard duo from Central. Maru, now dizzy, asked if they were here to test him again. From now on, he was calling them Baldy and Wig. Baldy then grinned, saying that Wig was actually Maru's biggest fan. Wig nodded enthusiastically, calling him King Maru. Maru, horrified, asked what the hell that meant. Wig didn't answer. Instead, he started massaging Maru's shoulders, marveling at how insane it was that he could produce yellow dust. He even claimed that Maru was more impressive than director Zhang himself. Maru received a huge thumbs up to the face, confirming that he had the potential to become the strongest ability user. The praise left him slightly embarrassed, but he couldn't ignore the expectations placed on him. A short while later, everyone was leaving for the day. Maru noticed Wooju hanging back and asked if there was a problem. The scene shifted to a monitoring station, a place designed to measure yellow dust levels. But this particular device wasn't functioning. Wooju apologized, admitting that he hadn't reported the issue, fearing he'd get blamed. Maru reassured him, saying that a small mistake like this wouldn't get him mistreated, or at least not here. Wooju hesitated before revealing something unsettling. The yellow dust was increasing. Alarmed, he asked if Maru was the cause, but Maru wasn't leaking dust. Then, he noticed a creature nearby. It was a child-sized demon, with bulging sacs on its chest, each resembling a grotesque tumor. Wooju immediately panicked, urging them to contact Central. But Maru, analyzing the situation, determined it was only a rank 1 demon. It would be easy to handle. Remembering the words from earlier, ***, he was supposed to become the best ability user. ***, Maru leapt toward the monster. Like a true King Maru, he sank his teeth into its neck, tearing into the creature with zero hesitation. The monster collapsed instantly. Wooju, startled by the sheer brutality of the attack, admitted that Maru had killed it in a single strike. But victory never came that easily. Something shifted within the corpse. From inside the first lifeless husk, a new demon emerged. Maru was confused. Hadn't he killed it? Why was another appearing? Then he noticed it. One of the tumors on its chest had disappeared. The creature had evolved. To make things worse, the yellow dust around them intensified. It wasn't a rank 1 anymore. It was now a rank 2. Maru continued fighting, but every time he killed the monster, it evolved further. Exhausted, he realized the pattern. The more he defeated it, the stronger it became. Wu Ju, now panicked, pointed out that the yellow dust levels had risen to rank 5. He turned to run, yelling that they needed to call for backup. But before he could escape, Maru told him to turn around. The monster had already lunged at him. It was faster. It aimed for Maru's neck, attempting to tear him apart. Maru managed to react, unleashing his corrosive venom at the last second. The monster was burned alive. For a moment, it seemed over, but once again, its body hardened. And just like before, another one emerged from within. Only this time, the remaining tumors on its chest signified something worse. It had evolved into rank 6.
Wu Ju stod frozen, terrified.
How were 2 people supposed to handle this? Maru calculated the situation, for tumors remained, which meant that, at this rate, it would evolve all the way to rank 10. They were completely screwed. Understanding they had no choice but to flee, Maru told Wu Ju to call for backup while he distracted the monster. Wu Ju argued, saying Maru wouldn't survive alone. But Maru, fueled by his newfound confidence, claimed he was King Maru, the strongest of them all. He charged in. He swung a devastating punch, but the monster dodged effortlessly, countering with a brutal strike to his stomach. Maru collapsed, gasping for air. The creature immediately followed up, slamming him face first into the ground. Pinned down, Maru realized something. He also had tumor-like sacs on his own chest, but they weren't disappearing like the monster's. His regeneration was nullifying the effects. The monster began crushing his skull. Maru, refusing to die, screamed for it to hit him harder. It did. The repeated beatings cracked the pavement beneath him. Wu Ju, unable to watch anymore, stepped in.
A grave mistake.
He unleashed his venomous ability, hoping to buy time. The demon barely flinched. Then, in an instant, the monster turned and struck him down. A devastating blow caved in Wu Ju's skull. He collapsed, blood pooling beneath him. Maru, still struggling against the monster, watched in horror. Wu Ju was supposed to run. Instead, he nearly got himself killed. But before the monster could finish the job, Maru lunged forward. He bit into its throat. Once again, the creature hardened, freezing in place. Maru, desperate, dragged Wu Ju's limp body away.
Barely conscious, Wu Ju verkligen whispered.
Why hadn't Maru run? Maru, breathing heavily, answered. This was his fault, so of course he wasn't going to run. But Wu Ju, unable to hold on any longer, lost consciousness. Maru checked his pulse. It was weak. If he left him here, he would die. He needed backup, but no one was coming. That meant only one option remained. He had to finish this fight, alone, for tumors remained. If it evolved for more times, they were doomed. So he had to kill it before it could change again. Maru ripped through the monster's hardened skin. Inside, he saw it, a red, pulsating core. This was its true form. He prepared to devour it, hoping to end the cycle. But before he could bite down, a massive, clawed hand shot out from the core, pierced straight through Maru's chest. Blood exploded from his mouth. The final evolution had begun. But this time, it wasn't the demon that was evolving. It was Maru. Maru felt a surge of exhilaration. He was about to evolve, but the monster had other plans. Instead of attacking, the creature grabbed him by the head, pulled him back, and launched him through the air. As he was sent flying, Maru realized something horrifying. The monster was heading straight for Wu Ju. Desperation kicked in. He screamed, telling the monster to stay away, but his words meant nothing. His body slammed into the ground, crashing against a tree. Pain shot through his back, but he pushed himself up, emerging from the impact site completely drenched in blood and slime. Ignoring the pain, he started running. Something felt off. His speed had increased. The evolution had already begun. But when he finally arrived at the clearing, the worst had already happened. Wu Ju was gone. The yellow dust was fading. The monster had disappeared. Heart pounding, Maru tried to understand what happened. His phone rang. A new emergency alert flashed on the screen. A level 7 demon had been spotted in another district. The monster had moved. Before Maru could react, his phone rang again. Diakman. The moment he answered, the man immediately started giving orders, warning him not to leave his house. But before Maru could explain that he was already in the field, Diakman hung up. Frustrated, he pushed forward, determined to find Wu Ju. Then, from a nearby bush, a faint sound. A phone notification. Maru rushed over and found Wu Ju's body. He turned him over, praying that he was still breathing. But the moment he saw the blood pooling beneath him, he already knew Wu Ju was dead. Panic set in. He needed yellow dust. He had to revive him. His own dust started spilling into the air, swirling around Wu Ju's lifeless body. But the hand never moved. The fingers never twitched. It was over. Wu Ju had been sent to the office just to die. Maru removed his shirt, covering his friend's body in silence. His rage burned. Meanwhile, in another part of the forest, Kong was reporting to Diakman. She confirmed that she was approaching the battlefield and asked for his location. Diakman responded that he was on his way, but something wasn't right. The demon's level was rising. It was now approaching level 9. He ordered Kong to hold her position and wait for backup. But before she could respond, the ground trembled. The entire mountain shook, sending shockwaves even into the distant city. The yellow dust thickened, climbing to level 10. This was no longer a normal mission. Diakman's tone changed. He warned Kong again, do not engage alone. But she already knew there was no time. Somewhere ahead of her, a massive figure emerged from the dust. First, she thought it was the monster, but then Maru turned around. His eyes burned with fury. The moment he saw her, he snapped. He ordered her to leave immediately. Confused, Kong asked what was happening. But before she could finish her sentence, Maru stormed toward her, rage in his voice. He demanded that she leave before it was too late. But Kong stood her ground. She refused to run. Then, over his shoulder, she saw it. Emerging from the fog of yellow dust, the monster stepped forward. It was now fully evolved, a 6-meter-tall abomination, bulging with muscle, its veins pulsing with raw power. It looked like a war god. Kang's mind raced. Maru had been fighting this thing alone. She asked if he was insane. Maru responded with a chilling resolve. He would kill it himself. He had to. Before she could argue, he grabbed a stake and stabbed it into his own chest. Kong panicked, immediately grabbing his arm, forcing him to stop. She demanded to know what he was thinking. Maru explained his plan. He had eaten the evolution demon, which meant if he inflicted a fatal wound on himself, he would evolve just like it. Kong froze. Something was wrong. Maru wasn't acting like himself. She tried to calm him down, assuring him that reinforcements were coming. But Maru wasn't listening. He refused to wait for anyone. Frustrated, Kong punched him in the chest. She warned him, if he kept doing this, he would lose his humanity. Maru ignored her. With cold determination, he drove the stake into his chest again. He didn't care anymore. Kong stared in horror. Then, she noticed something terrifying. Around them, the ground was littered with Maru's corpses. He had already killed himself multiple times. The evolution process wasn't new. He had been doing this over and over. As she struggled to process the truth, the monster charged from behind. Kong turned, barely fast enough to react. The creature's fist came down like a meteor. She couldn't dodge. There was no time, but at the last second, Maru caught the punch. His hand crushed the beast's wrist. Bones shattered. The monster flinched. Maru smiled. For the first time, the monster looked afraid. Desperate, it grabbed Maru's throat. But Maru didn't resist. Instead, he grabbed it back, pulling it closer. Diakman arrived at the site where Wu Ju's lifeless body lay. His eyes scanned the scene, questioning how things had escalated to this point. Before he could process further, a thunderous impact echoed through the mountain. Kang's fear grew. This wasn't the Maru she knew. Maru had launched himself at the level 10 demon, his expression completely blank. He threw a punch, but the monster regenerated its arm instantly, delivering a devastating counter to Maru's stomach. His body was sent flying, tearing through the forest, crashing into the mountainside with brutal force. Kong instinctively cut her palm, preparing to use her ability. But before she could engage, Diakman grabbed her arm, holding her back. She needed to stand down. A level 10 demon was beyond her capabilities. He warned that they couldn't afford to lose another person. Kong froze. Another person had died. She hadn't realized someone was already lost. Diakman then turned his focus to the battlefield, his gaze sharp. Why was Maru here? He had explicitly ordered him to stay home. Meanwhile, at the Special Service headquarters, Yo-Yong shouted, announcing that a level 10 demon had surfaced on Ghana Island. A woman seated behind a desk, the director of the Incheon branch, calmly stated that she had already deployed reinforcements. If things got out of control, they would notify Director Jung. Jung sat nearby, one leg crossed over the other, expression unreadable. The last level 10 demon incident had happened 2 years ago. Back then, the entire Sirak Mountain team had been wiped out, along with countless civilians. Yo-Young was on edge, but Jung remained composed. This time, they had Diakman. And then there was Maru. Back on the battlefield, Maru rose from the wreckage, unfazed. The demon mocked him, but Maru lunged forward, aiming another strike. The monster met his punch with its own. A brutal collision. Maru's entire arm was shattered on impact. The bone crunched, muscle torn apart. Even so, he pushed forward. The demon grabbed him by the neck, lifting him effortlessly. Diakman clenched his jaw, preparing to intervene. But Maru didn't stop. Despite his mangled arm, he lunged forward again and bit down on the demon's throat. Kong and Diakman stood in stunned silence. Maru had lost his damn mind. His body twisted unnaturally, regenerating at a monstrous rate as he tore into the demon's flesh. His teeth ripped through muscle, bones cracking beneath his bite. With a sickening crunch, he devoured the creature piece by piece. Even after the demon collapsed, Maru continued pummeling its skull into the dirt. He wasn't stopping. Kang's eyes widened in horror. This wasn't just about killing the monster. This was something else. The leader of the opposing team stepped forward, barking at Maru to stop. Kong rushed in, blade flashing a clean slice. The demon's head rolled onto the ground. Maru's fists trembled. For a moment, silence. Then, Kong stepped forward and embraced him. His body stiffened, breath hitching. The rest of the reinforcements finally arrived, taking in the carnage before them. One of them asked if Kong and the leader had taken down the demon. Diakman answered simply, "Maru killed it, alone." Xiao Wu's expression hardened. He couldn't believe it. Maru, a former level 1 nobody, had killed a level 10 demon, alone. A few days later, the team stood at Wu Ju's funeral. His family sobbed, while the others stood in heavy silence. Xiao could barely speak. Kong asked Diakman if he was okay, but he simply stated that you never get used to this. Kong wanted to know how the incident would be handled. Diakman explained, as always, the central office would cover it up as a work-related accident. At least Wu Ju's body remained intact. At least his family had something to bury. However, Ghana Island was no longer considered safe. Kong hesitated before asking if Maru had sent any messages. He hadn't. After leaving his resignation letter, he had vanished. Kong volunteered to go find him. She needed to talk to him, but Diakman shut her down. He had seen what happened to survivors. He told her about his own past. Years ago, when he worked at the central office, his entire team had been slaughtered by a level 10 demon. He was the only survivor, and after an experience like that, you never go back to being the same person. Maru had entered a new reality. Whether he returned to who he was before wasn't up to him anymore. Meanwhile, Maru lay on his bed, staring at the ceiling. Yellow dust seeped from his body, spreading into the air. Suddenly, the ground beneath him cracked. A bloody hand emerged from the darkness. He turned his head. Jung stood in his room. Maru flinched, startled. He hadn't even sensed him. Jung calmly stepped forward. He had come to talk. It was clear that Maru had been avoiding everyone since Wu Ju's death. Maru tensed, not knowing what to expect. Jung simply smiled and asked if he was surprised. Maru felt a cold chill running down his spine, fearing he'd be held responsible for Wu Ju's death. But Jung, unfazed, simply stated that the boy had died because he was weak. The sheer indifference in his tone unsettled Maru, but Jung dismissed it as irrelevant emotions. What mattered now was Maru's mental state. Without warning, Jung sat on the edge of Maru's bed. Maru tensed immediately. Why the hell was this guy sitting here like this? This wasn't right. Call Kong. Call someone. Get him out. But Jung continued, speaking calmly but firmly. Maru could not end up like his father. Maru's stomach twisted. How did Jung even know about his father? Then, Jung revealed the truth. He and Maru's father, Suwon, had been the first ever squad leaders when the demons first appeared. They were also the first to be sent in. The memory cut through time like a blade. 1999. Jung, 30 years old, stood in the midst of a battlefield, firing round after round at a massive demon. The bullets did nothing. The creature advanced unfazed, its monstrous limbs shielding itself from the gunfire. Suwon barked an order, "Keep shooting." Jung hesitated for a moment, then felt a hand grab his throat. Suwon shoved him back, eyes sharp. Jung would lead the 6th Squadron. No more hesitation. Meanwhile, their comrades were torn apart. One soldier was sliced in half before he could even scream. Suwon pulled out a grenade. If bullets didn't work, they'd blow it to hell. Everyone threw their grenades. The entire area erupted. The forest vanished in a fiery explosion. Smoke filled the sky. Silence. After a moment, the squad cautiously approached to confirm the kill. But when the smoke cleared, the demon was still standing. Half its body was missing, but it wasn't dying. Instead, it opened its mouth, inhaling the thick yellow dust in the air. It regenerated instantly. Panic set in. They opened fire again, trying to put it down before it could heal completely. Too late. The demon ripped through their ranks. Blood, screams, limbs torn apart. Suwon stood frozen, unable to process what he was witnessing. The squad was wiped out in seconds. When Jung regained consciousness, the battlefield was silent. Bodies were everywhere. In the center of the carnage, Suwon knelt alone. Jung approached him. Suwon was staring blankly at the corpses. He kept muttering to himself, "Why did they all die? What was that thing?" Jung barely had time to process Suwon's words before more yellow dust began swirling in the air. The battle wasn't over. Suwon's expression changed. This time, he wasn't shocked. He wasn't confused. He understood something, and then he ran. Jung called after him, but Suwon ignored him. So Jung followed. That's when they saw it. A colossal demon, its body covered in 36 blinking eyes. Jung's blood ran cold. He shouted for Suwon to run, but Suwon turned to him. "If you want to live, you need to accept this." Jung had no idea what he meant. Then a portal ripped open. From its depths, a monstrous hand shot out and speared Jung straight through the chest. Back in the present, Jung ended the story there. He assumed Maru already knew what came next. Suwon survived. He joined the government, but he was never the same again. Maru swallowed hard. What happened to him? Jung's voice was matter-of-fact. After that incident, Jung had tried to convince Suwon to lead the organization, but he refused. Something inside him had shattered. He became obsessed with one goal, reaching a place called the Abyss. Maru's head throbbed. A memory surfaced. He was a child. His father's hand gripped his wrist, dragging him forward. "This is how we reach the Abyss." Jung's words rang clear. Suwon chose to become a demon because he believed it was the only way to defeat them. Maru's breathing became uneven. Jung leaned forward. Anyone who inherited demon blood had the potential to fall into the abyss. At any moment, they could cease to be human. Maru refused to believe it. He stared at a faded photo of his father. Was he really a demon now? Or was there more to the truth? The next morning, at the office, Diakman sighed. Maru had missed work again. It was time to start tracking him down. Kong grabbed her coat, ready to leave. She'd find him herself. But before she could step out, Maru walked in, late, apologizing. The office fell into silence. Maru, however, wasn't focused on them. He had made a decision. He would stay. He would find the truth himself. He refused to believe Jung's claim that his father was truly gone. Meanwhile, in a dark room, Jung stood before a massive, chained entity. The air around it shimmered unnaturally. Jung's gaze was calm. Preparations are almost complete. Soon, you will see the abyss. Back at the office, the mood was tense. Even Dion, normally talkative, kept quiet. She forced a smile, suggesting they go eat. Maru barely acknowledged her. He just stared blankly at his desk. Dion and the others left, commenting on how empty the office felt. Even before Wooju died, things had been strained. Now everything felt broken. A while later, Diakman called Maru over, handing him a trash bag and telling him to take it out while he prepared some ramen. Stepping outside with the garbage, Maru nearly bumped into Kong. He hadn't realized she lived nearby. She responded that it was obvious. After all, living close to the office was convenient. In fact, most of their squad resided in the area. Noticing him struggling with the trash, she reached out to help. Their hands briefly touched. Maru felt his chest tighten. She told him he couldn't keep blaming himself for Wooju's death. Everyone on the island carried that responsibility. But Maru looked away, rejecting the comfort. He knew it was his fault. Kong simply walked ahead, saying she wasn't trying to console him. She was telling him to move forward. That was the only way to survive in this world. Everyone in their squad had lost someone important. Maru didn't fully understand what she meant. Before he could dwell on it, an alarm blared. More trouble. Diakman, gripping his stomach, groaned that he wasn't going this time and assigned the mission to Maru, Seo, and Dion. Maru was about to grab his jacket, but Seo stood up first. If Maru wasn't mentally stable enough to handle the mission, Seo would take his place. After all, knowing him, he'd probably just screw up again. Maru's heart pounded. His body collapsed into the chair, paralyzed. Seo clicked his tongue, already frustrated with how weak he had become. Up in the mountains, Dion cautioned Seo about what he said. Maru was clearly shaken, but Seo didn't care. Someone that broken wasn't worth worrying about. They just needed to find the monster and kill it. Before he could finish speaking, a spike shot straight into his forehead. Seo collapsed. He regained consciousness seconds later, completely disoriented. Dion and Isaac were already on guard. Turning his head, Seo saw it. A massive, crimson beast towered over them. His presence was terrifying. Seo wasted no time. He snapped a finger. The monster's neck exploded. Its lifeless body crumpled to the ground. Dion and Isaac cautiously approached, asking if it was really dead. Before Seo could answer, he noticed something else. A fat, round creature waddling nearby. His eyes widened. Jang, it was his cat. But what the hell was it doing in the mountains? Seo grabbed it, confused. Jang felt oddly heavy today. He turned to the others, announcing that they were heading back. But he couldn't shake off the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Diakman was already in a foul mood when they returned, demanding to know why Seo had brought a demon from the mountains into their base. Everyone froze. Kong immediately ordered Seo to drop it. What looked like a chubby house cat was actually a monstrous infant, a duplication demon. The second it hit the floor, it lashed out. A spike pierced Seo's forehead again. The room plunged into chaos. Seo, groaning, staggered as the creature fled. To him, it still looked like his beloved pet running away. He sprinted after it. The others followed, navigating through the dim corridors. They suddenly stopped. In front of them, a door. It hadn't been there before. Even Diakman was caught off guard. A few minutes later, everyone was sitting in the briefing room. Diakman leaned forward, rubbing his temple. So, let me get this straight. You idiots actually brought a duplication demon into the office. The squad awkwardly looked toward Seo. Seo pointed at Dion. She was with me. Dion stood up sharply, cutting off the argument. Assigning blame wouldn't solve anything. They had to hunt the demon down. The air grew heavy. The duplication demon was dangerous. Not just because it could mimic creatures, but because it could create illusions. It was already spreading yellow dust. They had to act fast. Standing before the mysterious door, Kong warned them to be cautious. This was likely a constructed illusion. Steeling themselves, they entered. Inside was an impossibly vast space. As they cautiously moved forward, Kong pointed toward something emerging from the haze. A colossal figure loomed in the fog. Their hearts stopped. It was the spider demon, a massive, grotesque being. At its feet lay a boy's lifeless body. Dion gasped, staggering backward. Memories rushed back. The child's voice echoed, calling her mother. She could still remember holding him moments before he died. She froze. Then she ran, straight toward the corpse. Kong yanked her back, gripping her tightly. This wasn't real. The spider demon had killed her son years ago. This was just an illusion. Dion, trembling, tried to convince herself that Kong was right. But then, Maru asked a chilling question. If this is an illusion, does that mean the monsters aren't real either? Seo furrowed his brow. The duplication demon had created this space, meaning everything within it had to be a fabrication. Maru wasn't convinced. He suddenly remembered Jung's words. Demon blood flows in your veins. It holds memories, knowledge. That's why you have powers. Something clicked in his mind. If that were true, could the duplication demon create copies of monsters they had encountered before? Kang's expression darkened. Not just any monsters. The level 10 spider demon. The devourer demon that had granted Maru his abilities. And worst of all, the monsters they weren't ready to face yet. The problem was clear. If the duplication demon could truly replicate everything, how were they supposed to stop it? Maru's chest tightened as a familiar dread overtook him. If the gluttony demon was among the recreated monsters, his worst nightmare had already begun. His legs gave out beneath him. If that thing appeared here, it would kill everyone. Before his panic could fully consume him, Diakman reassured him that no one was dying today. The squad advanced toward the creature. Kong led the charge, reminding everyone that their best chance was to cover each other. Seo snapped a finger at the same time Kong slashed through the demon's neck. The monster collapsed. For a brief moment, it seemed like they had won. Then, a new door materialized before them. In an instant, everything changed. The duplicate demon's true power had been revealed. Kong quickly checked Jean 1, who confirmed she had recovered. Maru clenched his fists. She had already the death of her son. How more times would they be forced to suffer? Seo exhaled sharply. They needed to next door and get out of this nightmare. As they pressed forward, bodies littered the ground. Maru noticed something strange. Mold covered the walls. His eyes widened. He knew exactly whose memory this was. King Bok stood frozen, trembling. Tears streamed down his face. He called out to someone. His wife. Maru watched as his memories played out before them. The moment he lost her, how she died in the mold. Seo urged everyone to look up. A scarlet figure clung to the ceiling. A grotesque mass of moss and decay. Spores rained down. Maru barely had time to react. He inhaled one. The mold entered his lungs. He vomited violently. A creeping nausea overwhelmed him. He had to check on the others. Everyone was already down. His vision blurred. Only one left standing. Of course, his generation was too strong. Clenching his teeth, he knew he had no choice to deal with this himself. Without hesitation, he lunged at the creature. His teeth sank into its flesh. For a second, Maru panicked. What if this was an illusion? What if he had just bitten one of his own teammates? But then, the monster shuddered. It was real. His body trembled. He tore off a chunk. A second later, his teammates stirred. Isaac gasped for air, coughing violently. "I thought I was dead," he muttered, still dazed. Kang's gaze drifted toward Buck. He still stood watching his wife. Now they all knew how she had died. The truth behind his powers. Maru read Kang's words. Everyone in their squad has someone. He wasn't the only suffering. He couldn't let his pain consume him. Determined, he moved forward, shoved past Seo, shoving him back. "Move," he muttered, stepping forward. Without hesitation, opened the next. Maru tried to warn him. They had no idea what was behind it. Seo didn't care. Whatever was waiting for them, he would kill it. They stepped through, the lone figure standing by the gate. Maru narrowed his eyes. It was Seo. No, not quite. His features were twisted. Something was wrong. Maru froze. Before he could react, a towering shadow loomed behind the duplicate. A grotesque entity emerged. The temple demon. Seo didn't flinch. He stepped forward. He spoke. He was asking for something. Power. He had an ability stronger than his. Maru's blood ran cold. Seo had willingly asked a demon for power. The temple demon responded. It snapped its. Seo's leg shattered instantly. The pain barely registered before the creature swung its arm down. Seo barely dodged. He lunged forward, breaking a finger. The demon barely reacted. Dozens of arms on it had 8 fingers to. The air cracked. Seo collapsed. His bones contorted. He couldn't move. Maru realized Seo was losing. That meant he had to fight dead. Kong, Jin, and Diakman all to attack. Then the monster moved. As many hands twitched. Then they shattered. The squad's bones followed. Everyone's in agony. Maru collapsed, barely able to breathe. The temple demon was stronger than anything they had faced. Maru was the first to recover. His regeneration was keeping him alive. But something was wrong. He wasn't moving. Maru shouted him to get up. He had the ability as the demon. He should be able to fight back. Seo remained on the ground. His fingers, his teeth. Maru saw the rage in his eyes. Seo was supposed to be stronger than his, but here was losing to Maru again, falling behind. What was the power if he couldn't even win? The temple demon raised its arm. More hands formed. Maru braced. He was the only one left standing. The monster's fingers snapped. His body crumpled. Even his regeneration struggled to keep up. Maru gasped for air. The demon walked past him, calmly, casually, as if nothing stood its way. Tried to move, but his body refused. He Diakman, desperate. Do something. Diak remained. His hand refused to move. First time, Diakman couldn't pluck his eye out. Maru was devastated. His leader was useless. He was screaming at Seo to do something. He was the only one who understood this power. The temple demon loomed over them, its arms multiplying. Seo hesitated. The monster struck. Hands erupted from its body, latching Kong and lifted her into the air. She didn't understand what was. Neither did Maru. Seo was the only one who knew. Blood had dripped from the monster's wound. Wherever the blood landed, more hands appeared. His limbs twisted unnaturally. Maru ran forward. A massive fist slammed in his throat. He was next. Watched. One was powerless until he snapped his teeth. Blood splattered onto the ground. The templeman's own ability acted against itself. Hands burst from the floor, restraining the monster. It froze. Flash of steel. The spider demon's fang pierced its neck. Dion had landed a final blow. They were exhausted. Seo slumped against a wall, relieved. At least he had learned something. Maru approached him, expression unreadable. Mocked Seo. Time he wanted to see him actually use that ability. Seo sneered, told him to shut up, and walked away. Maru scowled, just giving advice. After they moved toward the next door, the moment they approached, something changed. A sound echoed through the space. Didn't recognize it. Neither did Kong. Maru stepped forward. Something about this place felt. He opened the door. Rose. A child's voice echoed. Father. Inside, a terrifying creature loomed over a figure. Himself. Maru watched himself struggle against the monster, desperate. The beast's eyes in the dark dragged him forward. His father held his arm, unmoving. "This is the path to the abyss," father had said. "If you want to protect the people you care about, you must embrace the power of the gluttony demon." The words struck him. They match what Zhang had told him. The had said his father abandoned his humanity. Had he lied? At the central headquarters, a fist slammed onto the table. The white-haired woman scowled. "This is far worse than we expected. Too few ability users." The number of demons kept rising. Zhang remained calm. "It doesn't matter," he said. She wasn't convinced. The number of rank 7 ability users in India was dangerously. She accused him of forcing people to become stronger. Zhang didn't deny it. "If necessary," he admitted. Her pen snapped. It was insane to let civilians die just to create stronger ability users. A knock at the door interrupted them. A young woman. "The materials you requested were delayed," she reported. "We've lost contact with Ghana Island." The haired woman's eyes narrowed. "Find out if those bastards work early again." Back dungeon, the squad stood the gluttony demon. It roared. They prepared for battle. Then it did. Within seconds, the creature dissolved in floor. Gone. Jean 1 frowned. Why had it without attacking? The Akman's expression darkened. This demon felt different. Everyone let out relief. At least they did to fight it. Then, "Sister," Kong tensed. She told them to stay back. Maru tried to stop her. She refused. She needed to be ready for the real thing. Maru knew this was a mistake. Seo had struggled against the temple demon. How could Kong win alone? But still, he let her go, or so he pretended. Maru followed her. He needed to see what was happening. Kong was locked in battle with the red monster. As Maru observed, another demon stood nearby, watching. Like the gluttony demon, it had eyes, and just like before, it began to dissolve. Kang's blade shattered. The monster lunged. Maru shouted, warning her. She remained defiant. She would handle this alone, but he insisted. The monster was using some kind of defensive ability. If that was the case, she should have that power too. She paused. The door closed. Seo stated that it was enough. They had no choice but to wait. Time passed. The door creaked open. A bloodied hand reached through. Everyone froze. Then Kong stepped forward, alive. She collapsed into Maru's arms. He was relieved. Seo was furious. She had defeated her demon alone, while he needed help. Unstated that only 2 demons remained. Yaks and the leaders. Suk reasoned that the creature from the forest resembled Yak's abilities. It made sense. When he had first encountered the demon, he had also been searching for his cat. That meant only 1 demon remained. The leaders. Diakman scratched his stomach, indifferent. They were beginning to realize that he wasn't taking this seriously. His demon was rank 10. Yak commented on this. Diakman merely laughed. With the threats gone, everything was safe now. Maru celebrated. Perhaps this really was the best possible outcome. The air was clear. The creature had vanished. Diakman suggested taking Kong to the hospital, and then going for Korean barbecue. Maru punched him in the face. Silence. He grabbed Diakman by the collar. Something was wrong. He accused him. Seo demanded he stop. Maru pointed out a contradiction. Diakman had eaten Korean barbecue yesterday and suffered stomach pain. There was no way he would want to eat it again. Everyone paused. Diakman looked confused. Then he bolted. The real Diakman rammed into him with a car. Everyone was shocked. As the dust settled, a red demon emerged. In the aftermath, Diakman realized something. While he had been hospitalized, they had brought a demon here. If the central headquarters found out, everyone's salaries would be cut for an entire year. This entire incident had to remain a secret. Outside, Kong was exhausted and ready to go home. Someone called to her. It wasn't Maru. It was Seo. He wanted to talk. Then he revealed something shocking. The demon from her memories. He had seen it before. She was stunned. He told her that demon was Director Zhang. Seo knew the truth. 20 years ago, a child entered his mother's room. He asked where his father was. She answered coldly, working in the basement. He didn't care about them, so they shouldn't care about him. Seo went outside. He peeked through the basement window and froze. His father was transforming into a demon, back in the present. Kong refused to believe it. Seo insisted. When he had entered the basement, he saw nothing but a monster. He didn't have definitive proof, but as time passed, he became convinced. Kong asked, if Zhang was truly a demon, why did he stand there and watch her family die? Seo admitted that was exactly what he wanted to find out. He had infiltrated all of this just to uncover Zhang's true identity. If he grew strong enough and joined central headquarters, he could get closer to the truth. Kang argued that childhood memories weren't enough to prove anything. Seo smirked. He already had a plan to get definitive proof. Seo needed something before moving forward with his plan. Kang demanded to know what. At central headquarters, Maru and Kang sat across from Seo. Maru was frustrated. They were only here because of Seo's ridiculous conspiracy theory. The room was silent. Then Zhang entered. He apologized for making them wait and sat down. He asked what they were here to discuss. Maru hesitated. Seo spoke first. He claimed that Zhang had been present when Kang gained her abilities. Maru was shocked. Zhang acted confused. He asked for clarification. Kang explained. The demon from that day had eyes, and she had heard that such a demon was Zhang himself. Maru hadn't realized their plan was to confront him directly. Zhang sighed. They had been misled by Seo's delusions. First, Seo blamed his father for his mother's death. Now he was calling him a demon. Maru had no idea they were father and son. Seo slammed the table. This wasn't about his mother. He wanted to know Zhang's true identity. He turned to Maru. He ordered him to use yellow dust to expose the truth. Zhang warned him, if he misused that power, he would lose all protection from Ghana Island. Maru hesitated. Kang urged Seo to drop it. She wanted answers too, but this wasn't the way. Maru thought back to Kang's childhood home. He remembered seeing the demon kill her brother. He asked if this was truly the best way to uncover the truth. Then he stood. If that was the case, Seo had to take responsibility. Yellow dust began to swirl. Seo agreed. Zhang stood. He asked why his own son was doing this to him. Seo didn't hesitate. He began breaking his fingers. Zhang was nothing more than the man who had abandoned them. Zhang stood still. Behind him, glass shattered. Seo lunged, slamming his shoulder into Zhang's chest. Zhang was sent flying out the window. Maru panicked. There was no dust for Zhang to use. If he hit the ground, he was dead. Zhang simply told them to watch. As he fell, a rift opened, a spatial portal. Zhang emerged from the void. Yellow dust seeped from his mouth, proving Seo was right. Yuyang burst into the room. She demanded an explanation. Kang pointed at Zhang. She accused him of being involved in her family's murder. Zhang asked a question. Was it just the three of them who suspected him? Silence. He smirked. That answered everything. He activated his spatial ability. The floor cracked. In an instant, the entire room shifted. They were somewhere else. A random, isolated building. Yuyang demanded to know what he was doing. Zhang casually responded. These kids had seen too much. The room was already ruined. Why not spill some blood? He swung his hand. A spatial tear ripped through the air. Yuyang shouted a warning. Everyone dodged. Maru turned. The wall behind them had vanished. Zhang asked why Yuyang was interfering. She called him insane. He sighed. He had wanted to turn them into weapons against the abyss, but they were too troublesome. Removing them was the better option. Maru was confused. Why was he being accused of siding with the abyss? Zhang prepared another spatial cut. Humans were too weak. A hand emerged from behind them. A split second later, two heads rolled. Maru froze. Then Yuyang stabbed herself in the chest. Her hand gripped her heart. She activated her ability, Eternal Pause. She could sacrifice 5 years of her lifespan to rewind 5 seconds. The scene reset. Now she saw Zhang preparing to strike. Zhang frowned. He had done this before. Her bloodied chest confirmed it. Maru was still shocked. He had just seen them die. How were they still alive? Kang found it strange. No one besides the director should have been able to sense her ability. Before she could process it, and Calvo charged. They had no time for hesitation. The duo attacked together, but Zhang vanished midair and reappeared behind Seo. He grabbed Seo's wrist and questioned whether his father had truly tried to kill him. Seo snapped a finger. Zhang's entire arm twisted violently. The director glared. He declared that he had done it because he was not Seo's father. Without hesitation, he prepared a spatial cut. Maru and Kang barely managed to slam him to the ground. Zhang chuckled, warning them, if they weren't careful, they'd die again. Strangely, Yuyang was ordering them to capture him alive. They had too many questions. Peruka and Calvo disagreed. They interlocked their hands. Their blood intertwined. They vowed to go all out. Peruka moved first. His speed doubled thanks to their ability. However, Zhang barely moved. With a single spatial cut, he decapitated Peruka. Everyone had expected him to lose instantly, but even without a head, Peruka punched Zhang square in the face. His severed head spun mid-air, grinning. they were going to win. Calvo revealed the true nature of their ability. As long as their blood pact remained intact, they couldn't die. Zhang swung another cut, but their connection restored itself instantly. Now it made sense why Peruka had explained everything. The pact could not be severed. It was known as Final Mercy. Peruka collapsed but thanked Zhang. He was grateful, but today was the day they said goodbye. Maru was impressed by the duo's strength. However, Seo noticed something strange. Zhang was still dodging too easily. Kang pointed it out. Zhang was being forced into a trap. The blood chains had wrapped around him. Peruka and Calvo pulled with all their strength. Zhang was being torn apart. Yuyang ordered them to stop. At that moment, Kang sliced through his arm. Seo snapped another finger. The other arm shattered. It seemed like they had finally won. Zhang could no longer activate his power. However, yellow dust surged around him. He was regenerating. Yuyang yelled for Maru. He had to bite him now to stop the process. Maru rushed forward. He had never bitten a human before, but as he closed in, Zhang smiled. Maru froze. He watched in horror as Zhang's body transformed. Just like in Kang's nightmare, their punches collided, sending spatial shockwaves everywhere. Maru barely blocked, but his body was pulled into the darkness. Zhang absorbed the void. Everyone witnessed it. Maru vanished into the black abyss. The transformed Zhang grinned. Yuyang demanded to know what was happening. Zhang sighed. He hadn't wanted to reveal his true nature yet. If he wasn't Seo's father, then what happened to the real one? He placed a hand over his face. He couldn't believe it. He was about to slaughter his own soldiers. Kang realized what he meant. Her eyes widened. Zhang admitted it. He had summoned the demons that attacked her family. He had seen her potential. She was always meant to be a powerful user. Kang snapped. She lunged to kill him. Yuyang grabbed her arm. If she attacked, everyone would die. Kang demanded to know what they were supposed to do. Yuyang had no answer. Zhang had become too powerful. They had no chance. Kang's hands trembled. If they still had Maru, maybe they stood a chance. But bringing him back was impossible. No one had ever escaped Zhang's void. Meanwhile, Maru was running. His feet pounded against the endless abyss, but there was nowhere to go. He collapsed. He gasped for breath, and then he saw something. A faint light, a way out. Maru forced himself up. He ran toward it. Maru pushed forward through the strange light, but instead of an exit, he found Zhang thin, weak, and exhausted. Zhang, barely able to stand, stared at him, confused. He asked how a human managed to end up there. Maru, still catching his breath, innocently explained that he had been trapped after fighting someone who looked exactly like Zhang. He demanded to know what that thing was. Zhang sighed and revealed the truth. That creature was one of the demons that had escaped the abyss. Maru felt his stomach drop. Not only could that thing talk and think like a human, but it also had eyes. Zhang explained further. That creature was one of the 8 gods, beings far beyond ordinary demons. These 8 received their abilities from the Supreme King of the Abyss. Unlike regular demons, which acted purely on instinct, the 8 gods had complete autonomy and could make their own decisions. Meanwhile, in the real world, the demon unleashed another spatial cut as Kang yelled for everyone to protect Yuyang. If she died, they were all doomed. But it was already too late. Kang and Calvo were sliced cleanly in half. Yuyang gritted her teeth. Her body shuddered as she dug her fingers into her chest. With a deep breath, she activated her ability once more. 5 seconds rewound. Kang and Calvo reappeared. Their bodies snapped back just before they had been erased. Zhang, or rather, the demon, smiled. He praised Yuyang for her resilience, but he wondered, why did she keep obeying his rules? Yuyang clenched her fists, questioning the same thing. The demon smirked and raised his hands, summoning countless black portals. The air cracked. Demons rained from the sky. The battle had just become a massacre. The group huddled together for defense. At the same time, Maru desperately sought answers. What was the purpose of these demons? If the 8 gods were still part of the abyss, why were they fighting against other demons? Zhang gave a chilling response. The creature that took his body had betrayed the Supreme King. Now, it was trying to turn humans into a weapon against the abyss itself. Maru froze. So the entire special civil service was a manipulation? Had they all been pawns in this demon's personal war? If they killed this monster, would the war end? Zhang sighed. It was already too late. The war with the abyss had already begun. Maru clenched his fists. He asked if killing the demon would return Zhang to his body. If so, they had to escape together. but Zhang shook his head. His consciousness was trapped there. He couldn't leave. Maru grabbed him. He told Zhang that his son was waiting for him. Zhang paused. A flicker of surprise crossed his face. Then he laughed softly and asked Maru what he was talking about. His son was just a 5-year-old in kindergarten. Maru's breath hitched. Zhang's son was still. Maru pushed forward through the strange light, but instead of an exit, he found Zhang thin, weak, and exhausted. Zhang, barely able to stand, stared at him, confused. He asked how a human managed to end up there. Maru, still catching his breath, innocently explained that he had been trapped after fighting someone who looked exactly like Zhang. He demanded to know what that thing was. Zhang sighed and revealed the truth. That creature was one of the demons that had escaped the abyss. Maru felt his stomach drop. Not only could that thing talk and think like a human, but it also had eyes. Zhang explained further. That creature was one of the 8 gods, beings far beyond ordinary demons. These 8 received their abilities from the Supreme King of the Abyss. Unlike regular demons, which acted purely on instinct, the 8 gods had complete autonomy and could make their own decisions. Meanwhile, in the real world, the demon unleashed another spatial cut as Kong yelled for everyone to protect Yuyang. If she died, they were all doomed, but it was already too late. Kong and Calvo were sliced cleanly in half. Yuyang gritted her teeth. Her body shuddered as she dug her fingers into her chest. With a deep breath, she activated her ability once more. 5 seconds rewound. Kong and Calvo reappeared. Their bodies snapped back just before they had been erased. Zhang, or rather the demon, smiled. He praised Yuyang for her resilience, but he wondered, why did she keep obeying his rules? Yuyang clenched her fists, questioning the same thing. The demon smirked and raised his hands, summoning countless black portals. The air cracked. Demons rained from the sky. The battle had just become a massacre. The group huddled together for defense. At the same time, Maru desperately sought answers. What was the purpose of these demons? If the 8 gods were still part of the abyss, why were they fighting against other demons? Zhang gave a chilling response. The creature that took his body had betrayed the Supreme King. Now, it was trying to turn humans into a weapon against the abyss itself. Maru froze. So the entire Special Civil Service was a manipulation? As Maru emerged from the portal, he found himself in a completely unfamiliar place. He froze. The sheer concentration of yellow dust was overwhelming. His vision blurred, and his body felt heavy. He was about to pass out until someone called out to him. In the distance, a tall woman with long black hair and piercing green eyes stared directly at him. As soon as she made eye contact, every demon in the area turned. Then the ground trembled. A deafening roar shook the air. Maru turned, only to see an entire army of Hellspawn marching toward him. Nope, not happening. He turned and ran for his life, but he had no idea where to go. Panic surged through him until he spotted another portal. Without hesitation, he lunged forward. Just as the horde of demons swarmed him, he vanished. Maru burst out from the portal, directly behind the demon of space. The creature whipped around, stunned. Before it could react, Maru threw a punch. The demon teleported instantly, dodging it with ease. Let me hit you once, damn it. Meanwhile, Yuyang and Kong stood frozen in shock. Maru smirked, glancing around. Everyone was still alive. He clenched his fists. This time, he would end it. Xiao Wu, however, wasn't buying it. He shouted that Maru was being an idiot. How could he possibly fight something he couldn't even touch? But Maru didn't hesitate. Unlike before, he was certain he could win. The demon of space finally spoke, demanding to know how Maru escaped the void. Before Maru could answer, something surged from the portal behind him. A streak of green light slammed into the demon's back. The king of the inferno had arrived. Maru turned, eyes widening. The demon's arm twitched, as if something was pulling at it. Then a dark energy began to separate. The real Zhang's soul was being forcefully ripped from the demon's body. The demon of space snarled. He had to close the portals. If the king of the inferno took back too much power, he would become weak. At that moment, Yuyang noticed something even worse. The demons that had been raining down were disappearing. Zhang was sealing everything away. He was trying to end the fight. Seconds later, the battlefield fell silent. It looked like it was over. But then, the demon of space realized something. Most of his stolen power had already been reclaimed. His face twisted in rage. He turned toward Maru and clenched his fist. "It's all your fault." A spatial cut appeared out of nowhere. It sliced straight through Maru's neck. Blood gushed. His head toppled to the ground. Yuyang immediately reached for her chest, but Kang stopped her. "Look!" Maru's body twitched. A cocoon formed around his remains. Then his body emerged once more. His evolution had begun. Maru charged forward again. The demon of space fired another attack. Maru's body was shredded, but he kept moving. Yuyang's eyes went wide. The demon slashed repeatedly. Maru was torn apart again and again, yet he continued regenerating. Peruka and Calvo stood in disbelief. Is this guy even human? Xiao Wu, however, wasn't impressed. He muttered that this was the end for Maru. Then something changed. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9, 10. 10 Maris. All at once, they lunged at the demon. The demon of space tried to counterattack, but Maru dodged, slipping under the final cut. Then he bit down, right into the demon's neck. Everyone froze. This was it. It was over, or not. Maru's bite did nothing. The demon of space remained unharmed. Instead, Maru felt something pull at him. Then darkness. He was back in the void. The demon of space stood before him. Maru staggered. The demon's voice echoed. "You'll regret this. You should have never consumed me." Maru's stomach churned. The demon of Gula's power, it should have devoured the demon of space. So why did it feel like he was the one being devoured? The demon continued. "I see now. You were sent by the abyss." Maru froze. What? That didn't make any sense. Why would he? Before he could speak, the demon grabbed him by the throat. His grip tightened. "I'm not talking to you." Maru's vision blurred. "I'm talking to the demon of Gula, the one inside of you." The demon stared deeply into Maru's eyes. "Tell me, why are you so weak?" The pressure grew unbearable. "You were one of the 8 gods, and yet you let a mere human control you." Maru gasped. He could feel it. Something inside him was shifting. The demon of Gula was beginning to wake up. The demon of space continued. "It's useless. Every human that carries an 8 gods power eventually loses their mind." His fingers dug deeper. "So why not give in?" His voice twisted. "Return to the abyss, where the war never ends." The demon of space spoke with a smirk, urging the demon of Gula to stop fighting against humans. Together, they could be free. They could destroy the abyss and end everything. All they needed to do was unite their power and use human ability users as pawns. Maru's body twisted. Dozens of grotesque mouths began forming across his skin. A deep, primal hunger rumbled inside him. He was transforming, but then he screamed, "No!" The twisted evolution stopped. His body snapped back to normal. Maru clenched his fists. He refused to let this happen. No way in hell was he gonna let someone use humanity like that. If the demon of Gula thought it could take control, it was dead wrong. He was in control, and he was about to devour the demon of space himself. Back in the abandoned construction site, Maru's teeth sank into flesh. A chunk of flesh tore away. The demon of space screamed. Blood gushed. The demon fell backward, clutching its wound. Maru choked, gagging. His body trembled. Something inside him twisted violently, but it was too late. His ability had already activated. The demon of space began breaking apart. Xiao Wu stood motionless. His gaze remained fixed on his father's lifeless body. Silently, he removed his jacket and placed it over the corpse. There would be no return from this. The true Zhong was gone. Peruka and Calvo watched in stunned silence. It was over. The King Maru had won. Meanwhile, Yuyang gazed at the demon of space's remains. The reality of the situation hit her. What would happen now? How would the Special Public Service Division function without Zhong? The organization had just lost its most powerful leader. Back at the dormitory, everyone sat in the common area. Diakman sighed. He still couldn't believe it. Zhong had been one of the 8 demons. He always thought the director was weird, but never expected something like this. The others were too exhausted to react. Until Diakman sniffed the air. The room reeked of alcohol. Yuyang finally spoke. She called Diakman Sunbae as a sign of respect. Then, she requested an emergency meeting. But before she proceeded, she wanted to consult him first. What were they supposed to do now? Diakman leaned back and lit a cigarette. The answer was obvious. The government wouldn't stand by if this information leaked. If the world learned that the leader of the Special Public Service Division had been an abyssal demon, panic would spread. The entire system would collapse. They had to keep it a secret until they found a solution. And above all, they had to make sure no information leaked. A few hours later, Yuyang left with Peruka and Calvo. Before she walked out, Diakman called out to her. For the first time, he dropped the formalities. She had worked hard. She no longer needed to call him Sunbae. The others immediately burst out laughing. Even now, Diakman was still a bastard. Was he saying she was too old for formalities now? That night, Maru slept on the couch. Xiaowu scowled. "Why the hell are you sleeping here?" Maru grumbled that he didn't have the energy to move. Xiaowu clicked his tongue. He couldn't stand having someone sleep next to him. Maru then revealed that his room wasn't even a proper room. It was just a storage space. He usually slept on this couch. Xiaowu muttered something under his breath. Then, Maru called his name. He had something to say. "I spoke to your father." Xiaowu's entire body tensed. Maru continued. His father had been trapped in that spatial void all along. He had tried to bring him back, but it was impossible. Maru bowed his head. "I'm sorry." Xiaowu remained silent. For a moment, his face was unreadable. Then he simply said, "It's fine." But Maru wasn't finished. He revealed that Zhang had spoken about him and his mother. He missed them both. Maru then urged him, "Don't hate him anymore." Xiaowu turned away. A single tear slid down his cheek. As Maru lay down, he stared at the ceiling. He couldn't stop thinking. Before he died, the demon of space had warned him. Soon, one of the 8 gods of the abyss would come looking for him. From now on, they would have to fight the abyss alone. Without Zhang, without help. That meant one thing, the end of humanity. Maru felt a shiver crawl up his spine. How were they supposed to win against something like that? Then, a voice echoed. The king of the inferno spoke. "Step forward, bearer of my power." Maru's eyes widened. A knight in full armor appeared in front of him. His armor was cracked and battered. The figure's presence was suffocating. His gaze was burning. Maru froze. This night, he looked exactly like his father. Was this him, or was it something else? Before Maru could speak, the knight said one thing. "The time has come." Then everything turned to black.